Microsoft heed their call as they exercise their duty to add all games to Game Pass day one. Well, hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, as always, is Mr. Chris, coming off of what is undoubtedly a somewhat stoky cold open, clearly having a little fun, being a little... It's not clickbaity, because you've already clicked by now, you fool. Why did you click? I'm kidding. Thank you for clicking.
They clicked
Chris,
because
how
the
are you doing
title
today,
was free PSN codes in profile.
There we go. Now we just got to get a clickbait title too. And we'll have them right in our pockets. But Chris, how you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing okay. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. It has been a long day. I'm tired. And I feel old.
Oh,
because I'm looking forward to sleep in a way that I don't know that I ever have, which is interesting. Maybe it's just catching up to me. Or maybe this is what being old is. Maybe next week, you know what, Chris? If I'm feeling old, I might as well give into it. But giving into feeling old doesn't mean that you got to get rid of your daddy vibes. So I got a surprise for you. What's up, Chris?
Oh my God, Kiki has the show paused right now.
I know, right? The bottle of Jergens open.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. If you're new to the show, we hope you stick around and enjoy it. Today, we're going to get into talking about a few things. Of course, as we teased, Microsoft adding Call of Duty into Game Pass, Hunt Showdown dropping some support, Xbox also apparently going to some pretty big names in the industry and signing their next deal, as well as CD Projekt Red wanting to do a bit more than they currently do. But with all that in mind, we're going to start the show in a time-honored tradition of checking in on what we've been playing so that we can give you, the listener, what maybe your next game should be. But also, sometimes Chris and I end up throwing a game that we don't, that wouldn't have been on our radar otherwise toward each other. And so maybe that'll happen. But first, let's get the elephant out of the room for anyone who's just listening instead of watching. I put glasses on because I'm very semi-blind. And when I say very semi-blind, I can see perfectly fine with glasses. Anything I could see with the glasses, I could see without my glasses off, without my glasses on, and just a little squint.
So, are you saying you live a semi-blind kind of life?
Yeah.
Nice.
My third eye is blind.
Mm.
And now I'm semi-charmed with this new pair of glasses.
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, that's solid.
Doop, doop, doop. Man, that's like one of my favorite songs to whip out when people just clearly don't know the lyrics and they're just like, I love this song. And I'm like, yeah. And then as they're going, I make it at a point to very loudly sing, and then do it, crystal meth, lift you up until you break it. Don't stop. I'm like, this whole song is just about doing meth, right?
Yeah, right.
Doing
exactly.
drugs. I bumped again, and then I bumped again. I was like, come on, man. Figure it out.
Understand.
As my old coworker used to say, check him out. He goes by Funk Turkey on YouTube. Also, Kurt Connor. He put out an album recently. So go check it out if you like rock music. That's his forte. But we used to joke about that all the time. And he was like, white suburban moms will be coming out of their fucking dresses until they realize this song's about drugs. It's so good. But yeah. So I ended up getting glasses mainly because I got vision insurance because my wife and my kid needed it anyway. And so since hitting the ripe age of 30 and I started realizing some things that were easier for me to do visually, I'd be like, have to work a little harder. I went to the doctor and he's like, you can leave without glasses. I don't really care. He's like, you're not bad at all. So I have a negative 0.25 prescription. It's so small.
That's not even a prescription.
It is nice because the one thing I've genuinely seen a difference on is when playing games. Here lately, I've been noticing for about the last 6 months to a year, and I'm coming up on my birthday, so pretty much since I turned 30, that whenever I have subtitles on, I can read them, but they just kind of look a little hazy, like kind of cloudy around them. And I was like, it's probably my eyesight. It definitely is, because I put these on and was playing Stellar Blade, and I was like, oh shit, I can very clear. This looks so crisp. So it's as far as where my TV's at from me, because I guess I'm technically nearsighted, is where I'm ever so slightly nearsighted. So yeah, I see it at a distance, and it's just far enough away that text on the TV is probably the biggest thing I've seen a difference in.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. So
that's nice.
But Chris, now
Yes,
that
sir.
that's out of the way,
Yes,
we can
sir.
finally start Triangle Squared After Dark. Let these people know, what have you been playing this week?
It honestly hasn't been that crazy of a gaming week for me. I've been doing some other things that I'm excited about, but I have been playing a little bit of a couple games. Obviously, MLB The Show has been in my rotation, trying to get my JD Martinez card, so I've been playing a lot of events. But I also ordered a new computer, so I have a gaming laptop, and that is not a bullshit marketing term. It's got a 4070 in it, so it's legitimately pretty sick. So I've been playing Hades 2 and Manor Lords, the two most different video games I could have possibly chosen to play on my PC.
So you said Ladies 2?
Hades 2.
Oh, Ladies 2 nuts on your head? Got him. I'm kidding. What's up?
Mm-hmm.
What's up with Hades 2? Because it's early access, right?
It is early access.
I don't tend to play early access games. One of the only ones I have played realistically was that bit of Power World I played with you.
Yes.
So I've always been curious, what does that really entail? Since I don't tend to play early access games, how much of the game can you really play? Because like one of the games I've been playing, Baldur's Gate 3, I'll get into that in a bit, but that game was in early access for a long time. But what that essentially meant, if I remember correctly, was you could really only play the first act, right?
You could literally only play the first act, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was nothing further than that. As far as I can tell, obviously I'm not too far. Done maybe like 6 runs of Hades 2. But from what I've heard, the full game is in early access, can be beaten right now. So from what I understand, it's all just polish, really.
See, and that's where I get into this interesting thing of, I get the value because you can go ahead and start playing the game while just knowing that you may have a slightly suboptimal experience. But at what point does it just make more sense to be like, if the game is complete, why didn't you just spend a few months polishing it? Now, there's of course a reason. I assume it's financial. You have a complete enough game that you can put out there and people are willing to spend the money, and you get that money immediately in so that you can help pay to polish it the rest of the way up without having to take on the full risk of adding more time, which adds more cost without seeing any form of revenue yet if you hold on to the game until it's ready. But I don't know. Hades definitely had a story, and it was a big part of the game.
Yeah.
But these are also, I noticed most of the games that choose to go early access are very gamey games. They're far more involved around mechanics and the actual gameplay loop than they are necessarily about world building or storytelling. Like, they're there, but the games are always very heavily game. Yeah. So how do you feel about it? I mean, do you think it's I guess rather, let me rephrase it a little bit. Do you think that there's a reason, or do you find that you may even agree a little bit as to why Sony doesn't seem to currently see the value of early access? They don't let any early access games come out.
I don't know. I think it depends on the game. I think it should be a certain circumstances, right? Because for me, like if Hades 2 was on Xbox right now and not on PlayStation, and it was strictly because, well, they allow early access, I'd be pissed, you know?
Yeah.
But like there are some games I'm sure in early access that I wouldn't play on a 1.0 release. You know what I mean? So I think it all depends. I'm sure it helps Sony to not have to deal with customer support from people who didn't realize what they were buying. But I just think
and even if you give it to one like this, right? So to that point, I guess what you're saying is like this game, even if you bought it early access, most people would probably be like, oh, it's the full game. Maybe it's a little buggy or whatever. But I think it's mainly because Sony doesn't want to have to differentiate between explaining why they allowed Hades 2 to become out early access on their console, but not Baldur's Gate 3. And it's because PlayStation doesn't want to have people who didn't realize they weren't buying the full Baldur's Gate and then being like, it's only a third of the game. I want my money back.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think the explanation is fairly easy for them. It would just be we what you could go whatever route you want to go with, but the explanation is just we do this on a case-by-case basis, and Hades 2, we decided to let it go. Because don't forget, Temtem was an early access on PlayStation for, I think, like 3 years. So they have done this. Yeah, it was not...
I guess I didn't realize that Temtem was early access, but I never played it, so that's probably part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think you're right. It's something that Sony seldom does.
Yeah,
super seldom does. Yeah,
and the thing for me is like even something like Manor Lords, which I got through Game Pass. It's an early access game. It's something where I look at Sony and I'm like, why wouldn't you let this come on the store? I would love to know more details why, especially when, again, something like Temtem did come out in early access, like why they wouldn't allow it. And then you just have to plaster it all over the place, or maybe it doesn't show up in the new releases, but it shows up in a demos section, a paid demo. I don't know how you would justify it and keep the customer safe, but for me, it just seems like wasted potential. You know, something like Hades, which is, again, as far as I know, basically feature complete. Why shouldn't it be there just because there might be some bugs? And maybe you deal with some returns, but you already have a strict policy. So have a pop-up on the PlayStation Store when you go to buy it that says this is an early access game. You cannot refund early access games. It might be broken. Some parts might not work. You're not getting a full release. Do you want to continue? Yes or no? Yes. Purchase. I don't know why that's difficult.
No, I agree. And that was actually going to be my next question to you is, do you think it's something that Sony should really consider changing?
It's just a question of why wouldn't you, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to be, do you remember it just came out, like Everbound or something like that? It was one of these sort of open world survival games. But regardless of what it's called, like, why wouldn't you want to be on the edge of that and have it in on your system, right? Why would you want to let something like Hades 2 be exclusive?
Mm-hmm.
That to me is the thing that I don't understand. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, you might have some issues, but hey, we've got Hades 2. Enshrouded was the game I was talking about, right? So that had its moment a couple weeks ago. Why? What you're just losing that moment on PlayStation.
Man, you know what's weird about that though? It's like, yeah, you're right, and I think that game was a lot shorter lived in the gamer conscience,
for sure.
But I think a better example of a game that they probably could have gotten if. And maybe not. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm attesting to knowing why this game was exclusive console-wise on Xbox. It may have simply been because of Sony's policy. It may have been because it's a small dev team and they only really wanted to focus on one console at a time, which is also a completely viable reason to do that. But for the sake of looking at this from a what-if scenario, Valheim was a very big cultural moment for gaming where for months it was in the conversation. Almost a full year, it was kind of the game to be looking at. Even if you didn't have a console, or even if you didn't have a PC to play it, and if you didn't have Xbox when it hit Xbox, you probably still heard about it enough and kind of saw it and were like, huh. And the fact is that that's a cultural moment in gaming that PlayStation just completely missed. And I think it's a rough thing because I often look at, like Apple and Android, and how a lot of the time Apple users end up like parading these features that are new to Apple that have been a feature for a long time on some form of Android, because Android's all about trying new shit and seeing how it goes, right? But Apple's kind of thing, as opposed to Android, is no, we're going to wait until it's good enough that we feel confident putting it in our flagship product, because it's all we make is a flagship. We don't make a $200 phone for a reason. All of our products are important to us at the exact same level. And so when you look at that, Apple doesn't get things like fingerprint scanners until much later. They don't get things like 120 hertz screens until much later. They don't get things like OLED screens until much later. And it's interesting to see that, but no one seems to care on the Apple side, because they're like, yeah, but I'm getting the best version, or I'm getting a good enough version of it that they saw it as fit for mass appeal. So take that back into gaming for a second. Is it really that wrong to think if Sony's entire reasoning, which it would at least be helpful if they would say why they're not looking at these, but if Sony's entire reasoning is, hey, we want our console to pretty much be the console that you look at and you go, yeah, maybe I didn't get the thing while it was being tested out and wasn't necessarily as feature fit as everybody saw, but we got the best version of it. I know that when it hits PlayStation, it's going to be as feature complete as possible. And now that's a really hard thing to go through, because that actually, if that is the case, might explain why they were so upset about Cyberpunk, because as the story is told, Cyberpunk's quality assurance team basically tricked them into being like, no, don't worry, guys, approve it and we'll make sure it's fixed by launch.
Yeah.
But, a game like Cyberpunk is a game where arguably Cyberpunk was a early access release without being flagged as such.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Again, I still think the Cyberpunk situation happened because CD Projekt Red offered refunds.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying that, if anything, I think PlayStation's general mindset as to why they tend not to want to do these things and why they try to be strict in some ways is because that's bad PR.
For who?
In this case, PlayStation. Because you want to know what the PR became for PlayStation? Everybody suddenly being like, hey, y'all's return policy is ass. Because when you have that many people wanting to actually go through your return policy and they realize how not great your return policy is, suddenly everybody's looking at me and like, wait a minute, why is it so hard to return a game that's just shit that you approved and said was okay for your console, when clearly a lot of people are experiencing such bad issues that they can't even complete the game?
Yeah.
And so it brought attention to something that I'm sure Sony were very happy to not bring attention to and go on forever, just saying, no difference in our return policy. It's been the same forever. Now people are going, why is it so easy to return on Xbox and Steam? So, if Sony has a little bit more internal quality control, we'll call it, then they can hopefully stave off moments where they take bad PR and cost.
Yeah, I guess. I just think that's, in my opinion, like a little overblown, because Sony didn't change their policy.
I was trying to remember when was it that Sony changed their policy? Because they have changed it in the last 5 or 6 years or whatever it be. But that's when they changed it. I don't remember if it was Cyberpunk, so maybe you'll remember the catalyst. But they changed it to where as long as you hadn't downloaded the game, you could still refund it. And that was not the case prior. But I don't know what game caused that shift. I don't know if it was Cyberpunk or if it was something else.
I don't even know if it was a game, but more that was probably around the time Steam changed their refund policy.
Yeah. Either way, you get what I'm saying, that it's enough happened in some weird thing where they were like, if you haven't downloaded it within 14 days, you can return it. Which is still, for being dead, that's still a pretty shitty one.
2019.
Okay, so prior to Cyberpunk. I think it was post Anthem.
Faulty content. Yeah, it was post Anthem, because this article is saying that they allowed refunds for Anthem.
They did, which was unheard of at the time. So
I don't know. Look, I feel like I don't know, because I'm weird, because I just don't usually return stuff outside of the Cyberpunk, me just going, I wonder if they'll let me do this after I got the platinum, and they did. But outside of that, I don't return stuff often, but I don't know. I guess it's a little privileged to say it, but it just seems crazy to me that we're like buying stuff digitally and freaking out over return policies. Like, just go buy it in the store, or maybe wait for a sale. Like, I don't like it. Okay, here's my thing, right? It's not that the return policy is good. It's a bad return policy to a degree, right? But you also make purchases knowing the return policy.
And if you don't, then it's still on you.
Right. Like, that's what I don't get. It's like me buying baseball tickets and then going, I can't return these. I thought this was football. It's like, what do you mean? I don't know. It just seems weird to me. I don't really get it.
I think return policies in general are such a weird thing. And I think it's interesting because we're both Americans, but we have a number of listeners like Josh Ayers and whatnot who are in Australia, which apparently has very strict rules and regulations around how you have to support refund policies and things like that. And so companies like Sony are required to abide by the law in their area. So in Australia, you can return a game pretty much no matter what, from what I understand. There's probably some stipulation, but in comparison to what we have, it's drastically different. And that's because of the actual law in that area. But of course, the law in your area does dictate the way that the community around that area views the thing in which the law is set around. So in America, we don't get a lot of protection for return policy. Like there's not really a lot of places with really forgiving return policy. And I anytime I buy anything, I'm super apprehensive about buying it because my assumption is I probably can't return it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not actually true, but it goes to show that the way our society in America looks at things, clearly we're a little more inclined to be hesitant about buying things because we don't have an innate feeling that the government is pushing to have companies have to allow us to return it. And so therefore, we're like, do I really want to buy this car? Do I really want to do this? Because chances are you're not going to be able to return it. So I'm with you, but at the same time, the question becomes, is there value in wanting, I say this all the time, do you really want the government to be the reason that things are getting pushed? It's hard to say, but do you really want the only reason you get to have returns because the government forces companies to do something? But I wonder how much that would change our perception over returns. Because I'm like you. I'm like, I had partially because, like you said, privilege. I have enough exposable income, or disposable income rather, where I'm like, okay, I spent that. That's on me for making a dumb purchasing choice. I'll take that L and move on.
Yeah, look, hot take, but I would argue that's probably better for people. But going back to the original conversation, we were talking about early access. So no, I don't know. It seems like a loss to not have games like Hades on your console, even if they are early access, regardless of it.
Yeah, but do you see where somebody just saying like, well, we'll still have it just once it's ready?
Yeah. But
which is value in that.
But I would have bought this on PlayStation. So
yeah, I get it.
Like they're losing at the very least one sale, and given how big Hades is, I'd be willing to bet significantly more than one. That is not happening now, and there's not a lot of people. I don't believe there's a ton of people in my situation where I can play it on my computer. So maybe some of those people don't ever buy it there. They buy it on their computer. There's tons of loss here that seems to me just like, hey, put a disclaimer. When they call customer service, you go, can't return that, sorry, and then you move on. You're already doing that. That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah, what I think is really weird is, as somebody who is an Android user and has always been an Android user, I had an iPhone work phone for a little bit, but you know how fucking weird it is to go between two different operating systems for your daily, for a phone that you quite literally use all the time, and then doing everything almost completely backwards at the time. It was iPhone 4. It goes to tell you it was quite a lot. It may have been a 4S, but it was quite a long time ago.
It's a long time ago.
Anyway, point being, I've always thought it was interesting because arguably I'm on the opposite side of each thing. From a phone standpoint, I've always loved Android and the freedom that they give you. And a lot of people like Apple because of the quality attached to the name, right? But then you go into consoles and a lot of people view Xbox to be more akin to Android and PlayStation to be more akin to Apple, where PlayStation's whole thing is about quality. And clearly that checks out because part of the reason PlayStation's where they are is because of having very high quality internally produced exclusives that people look at and go, okay, if I see a game from this studio, I expect a high pedigree. And they have that in a way that few things have. Like Nintendo has that, but in a different area. Nintendo doesn't do that with more adult oriented content most of the time. So it's a similar thing. But
yeah,
I do think it's interesting that I end up playing PlayStation despite not being as Apple for my day-to-day use, despite their mission statements kind of being the same.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Very different, but
yeah, but you see a little bit of similarity between them. So either way, I wouldn't be opposed to open access hitting PlayStation, because then you don't feel like you have to go across the console aisle or buy a PC in order to be part of a cultural moment with gaming. But at the same time, I'm pretty happy to just wait until a game is ready to play it. So, I see both sides, but I'm probably almost always going to fall on the side of waiting until it's complete.
Fair. I'm down to try it. And then worst case scenario, I own it when 1.0 comes out.
There you go. So what's Manor Lords? You were talking about it, but I have zero clue. I've never heard of this.
It's like a medieval town builder. It's very up my alley and very difficult to play. Not difficult to play, but I don't understand the systems yet. And that's one of the issues. And then this goes back to the same conversation, but this is also early access. And I'm wondering if they will build a tutorial mission that I just don't have access to yet. So right now it's a lot of trying to figure out what's going on.
Huh.
But it's cool. It's you're building like hunting traps and tents and all this kind of stuff. Building small colonial houses. Sorry, my allergies are killing me right now.
You're
small
good.
colonial houses, all that kind of stuff. So it's cool. I'm ready to see a little bit further into it. I'm still at the beginning, like level 1 houses, all this kind of stuff. So, but I love these kind of games. I'm a big sucker for stuff like Crusader Kings and obviously Civ. I've played a ton of. So this is right up there.
Sure.
And it seems a little more. It's still like you're still playing God, right? In these games, you tend to not play. You're just playing God, and this one does feel a little bit more like you get to know the people in your town, because it's like one family per house, and you have to build houses for everyone. So it's cool. I'm really enjoying it, but don't have a ton to say about it yet.
Gotcha. That's cool. That's the type of game where I'm assuming you're playing this on PC, or are you playing this on Xbox?
On PC.
Yeah, okay, I figured. Because do you have you don't have an Xbox anymore, right?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So I wanted to be sure. Those are the types of games where they've started to come around on console a little more often, but they're the type of games we're used to. It's like, well, if you like those types of games, you're best served on PC. It just seems to be the case.
Yeah, and look, it's all these games are playable with a controller, but like Civ is better with a mouse. Baldur's Gate better with a mouse.
Weird question, but I don't want to play them with a mouse personally, because people like that with Diablo. I actually think Diablo 3 is way better on console. Now, I haven't played Diablo 4, but I played about 200 hours of Diablo 3 on PC and about 1,000 hours on PS4 and a couple hundred on PS3. And man, Carpal Tunnel fucking City on PC. I hate that. I hated it. My wrist ached for weeks. I hated it. But
gotta get your muscles up, dog.
My thing was always, why not just have that game support? Like, clearly, you built a control system for it for console. Why would you not just port that into PC and be like, hey, if you want to play this way on PC, you still can? I always hated that, because I'm like, why are you doing this work and doing it? It's the same reason you can play Oblivion with a fucking controller on Xbox 360 and PS3, but when you play the PC release of it, no controller support.
Yeah,
why?
I was playing that last night, and it doesn't have. I'm trying to see if Civ has controller support.
It should, because it's on console.
Yeah, but I'm checking on PC.
Oh, yeah. Well, what I was getting at, does Baldur's Gate 3 support mouse and keyboard play on console? Because a lot of games do now.
I think it does, yeah.
Yeah. It's not something I expect to commonly see, but it's interesting all the same,
No controller support for Civ. But, I mean, again, I don't know. I don't know about Diablo. I don't particularly care about that game, but like Baldur's Gate, just being able to click, like, because you'll have the radial menu that you have on console doesn't exist. It's all on the taskbar.
Yeah.
So it's just so much easier, to the point where I remember when me, Sean, and I think you were in the party that first night, were playing, I was like, I think I'm not going to play this on console.
You did say that.
Eventually I got there, but it was way better on PC.
What's interesting is it just depends on who you are, right? But I always like playing those games on console better because they hide that shit away. And on PC, UI is just monstrous on PC in most games, where it's just like there's so much shit on. It's one of my favorite things about Final Fantasy 14 online is that they hide all the shit that's normally a hotbar at the bottom. You have to hit buttons to bring those up so you can see what they are. And I'm like, great, this game is visually... looking at this screen is so much less of a clusterfuck than it is on PC.
Yeah, I think
on a lot of games of that style,
especially Baldur's Gate, the clusterfuck was easier to navigate than the radial menu. Still to this day, I played like 120 hours of Baldur's Gate 3, and I would still prefer to play it on PC. But
I'm with you enough on that game because it's slow paced enough, and that's not a hit at all. The problem with Diablo is that you have to click fucking everything in that game.
Yeah.
So when it's a game where hundreds of enemies are spawning on you at once, guess what you've got to do? Click, 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 click. And you have to do that to fucking move. You have to click where you're going. And so it ends up becoming this problem where it's like, I'm fucking constantly clicking in this game, and I'm sick of it. But, it's how it goes. Anyway, so I see you're back on XDefiant. This is the one we talked about a little bit, right? Call of Duty?
Yeah.
Call of Duty-ish. Classic Call of Duty. Boots on the ground.
Yes, boots on the ground. No, I really like it. I don't know.
Have you come around even more? Because you said you liked it, but now you sound like you're liking it.
I don't know. Like are
y'all going steady?
Yeah, I think so. It's my side piece. I still got my girl MLB, but I got a sneaky link in XDefiant, as children would say. What is happening? But yeah, so it's really fun. I like it a lot. I don't know how invested I'm going to be, but it's fun. Like, it goes back to that pre-time before. One of the big selling points for this game is no skill-based matchmaking, and you can feel that for sure. Like, I feel like I go more like a 1.0 KD for most of the time, but then you do have those games where you're clearly playing against worse people than you. And you do have those games where you're clearly playing against people so much better than you that it's not even fun to play. And I think that's good. Because I really think a perfectly balanced FPS, like obviously there's outlier games, but I feel like a perfectly balanced FPS, you should be maintaining a 1.0. Like, not saying you can't be better than that, but 1 kill, 1 death is usually where I think most 99% of players should be, and then kind of filling in the gaps from there with your better games or whatever it is. So
build yourself up from there. Yeah, because I do think one of the things that tends to go when someone's like, how good are you at a shooter game, right? Whatever game you are out there, how good are you at this game? Generally, a KD is going to give you a pretty good, like, what's your average KD? And I remember in Killzone 3, I had a pretty monstrous. I had like a 5.0, and I was like, yeah, let's fucking go.
Well, that's insane.
Don't wrong. Yeah, that's pretty high. I played a shitload of Killzone 3. And I was really fucking good at Resistance 2 online as well. I played the shit out of that game. And I got to a point where a lot of people were lauding Resistance 2 for its 32v32 online because it was so crazy at the time on a console, which was cool. And I like those matches. They're really fun. They're hectic. But my favorite Resistance 2 stuff was just everybody against everybody, 8 players. That shit, whoo! Man, I got really good at that. And there was a summer where it was like 8 hours upon hours a day, just fucking shit up and getting to a point where I was consistently top of the board. And that's a good feeling,
Oh, hell yeah, it is.
So it's funny. I'm not as into multiplayer stuff, but if I get really into a multiplayer thing and you start to get that thing, you're like, oh, I'm pulling this shit off. It's how I felt about Advanced Warfare. Me and Saul and my buddy Blaze would play often. And typically we were top 3 of the whole thing because we were taking it really serious and getting really good. And it's just like, that's a good feeling. And that's why kind of to your point, or I guess kind of what you were at least somewhat hinting at, is this idea that a lot of modern shooter games have that thing where your first game when you log in is actually primarily against bots, so that the game can kind of understand how good you are at that point, and then the next game will try and match make you with a reasonable skill level to what you put out. But the problem with that, it's actually probably good for psychology reasons, is that you hop on and your first game you fucking kill, and you're like, hell yeah, I did so good. You're not really thinking about the fact that most of that wasn't real people. And then the next game comes in and you're like, I'm getting my fucking ass wrecked, but I know I can kill it. I just killed it. So let me just keep playing because I just got to get back in the zone.
Yeah, exactly. No, I would love to see you give this a shot. I'm not going to sit here and use my highly touted reputation of recommendations, but I would say that I'd like to see you try it. Because I'm not confident that you would like it.
Yeah, I would say the problem with it is my sensibilities for shooter games are usually not. I quite like a lot of the ones that are. I'm going to finish my sentence.
It feels a little bit like Killzone 2 to me.
Oh. Mamma mia.
Yeah. It's like a little bit heavier. It's a little bit clunkier.
Mamma mia. Also, can we have a quick sabbatical here about Killzone 2? Because, John, I know you're listening. Killzone 2 is floaty. I read that and fucking laughed at 7 o'clock in the morning. Nearly woke my wife up cackling because I have never, ever heard someone describe Killzone, any Killzone game, as floaty.
It is. That was such an appalling take because it's objectively not true.
It is the exact opposite.
There's no objective world where Killzone is floaty. You have
Killzone 2 is the heaviest of them all.
Exactly. You have two camps of people. Killzone is too heavy, or Killzone is too heavy, but I don't think it's as heavy as the guys who think it's too or heavy. You know what I mean? Like, there's nobody out there that's like, oh, this feels like Call of Duty.
I laughed because I was like, the term floaty for a shooter makes I don't even know a point of comparison. My immediate thought was, are we talking about a platformer? Because like,
John,
that's typically what you use.
Write in to Discord, wherever. I want a 2,000 paragraph essay.
2,000 paragraph?
A 2,000 word.
Jesus Christ.
I'd love to see the 2,000 paragraph essay, though. A 2,000 word essay explaining what you think floaty means.
Okay, I'm actually going to give him. I'm play devil's advocate real quick. I think I know what he means. I would never describe it myself as floaty, but I could see how someone could look at this and be like, huh, that's kind of floaty. Killzone has this thing where Killzone's whole thing is about being kinetic with body weight.
I say that about cinder blocks all the time.
Okay, so Killzone's whole thing, definitely Killzone 2, is about being kinetic with weight. Right, so Killzone 2 is the heaviest of them all, to the point where even though that's the feel they wanted for the series, 3, they pulled up a little bit. They were like, okay, we're not that heavy, which, depending on who you ask, was the right call or not. Killzone 3 is still a great game, but the thing about Killzone 2 in particular is that weight brings with it sway. And I think I could see someone looking at the fact that when you aim in that game, unlike most shooters, right? Say you're playing Destiny, say you're playing Call of Duty, say you're playing even Halo. When you go to aim the gun and you stop it, it doesn't really carry the motion, the physics that a real person turning a gun would do. The gun doesn't overextend and then come back to center in most games. And if it does, it's usually so small that it's just trying to make you think it's doing it, and it'll do it visually. But when you actually go to shoot, it's essentially shooting straight, because that's a very specific type of shooting that people have learned to really like, is a very quick fire. I'm snappy. The gun's going right where I want it, and I feel that. Killzone 2's whole thing is I'm pulling this heavy ass gun over. So before I settle, it's going to overextend, maybe a little up, maybe a little past where I was trying to go. And eventually it's going to settle back down. I can see someone looking at that and, in my opinion, mistakenly using the word floaty to describe that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Like I said, John, I would love for you to explain to me what you meant by floaty, and we're just giving you hell, buddy. It was such a weird thing to see that I was like, wow, what is floaty? Floaty. So
Yeah,
everyone tell us what floaty shooting would be to you, because if I was going to say anything was floaty, and I still wouldn't, because I can't think of a shooter game that feels floaty.
What
if
does
anything,
it mean
I
to
would
you?
say like Halo, I guess, would be like, because like you have a lot of extra air and your movement all comes around. But even then, I struggle to think floaty fits, you know?
Well, so what do you, if you were to describe a floaty to me, what would you be talking about? Like, how do you visualize that?
Right, like so, let's separate it from shooters for a second and go towards a game genre where it's actually most commonly referred to as this. So when a platformer is floaty, it means that from the time that you hit the button to jump, you stay in the air a long time.
Uh-huh.
And then you eventually land, right? So think of it this way, Chris. You love Super Meat Boy, right?
Yeah, I do.
Super Meat Boy is not floaty at fucking all. It's super precise. You jump. You have a very anticipated way in which you're going to fall and hit the ground. Okay? Little Big Planet and a game like Sackboy's Big Adventure are floaty platformers. I don't think that's a bad thing. I like a good chunk of them. But the idea is that when you go to jump, you stay in the air longer than you would typically anticipate.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, you can learn to play around that. You go, oh, that's the feeling of this game's physics. Cool, I got this. And you'll eventually compensate. But for a lot of people, that's what floaty is. So trying to aim that into a shooter, a game like Halo and maybe some of the non-boots on the ground Call of Duty games may fit, where it's like you have ways to jump in the air and you're sticking around in air longer than you should. Because like Halo, you can get some pretty crazy jumps in, you know?
Yeah, you can. Okay.
And it doesn't. So that's the closest I can think to it. But I just think I wouldn't choose to describe a shooter game as floaty. So, all right. Baldur's Gate 3, played some more of it. Still not out of the Acts 2 just yet, but doing plenty of work. Did some cool stuff. Donovan's been playing all these different playthroughs, and Donovan and I found an area that he's never seen in all of his different playthroughs.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so hold on, let me actually look it up. It's BG3. It's the Blood of Lathander. Does that mean anything to you?
Mm-hmm. It does.
We did that.
Nice. That's cool.
And that was super sick.
Yeah, that's a good section.
Yeah, really good section. And it works out perfectly for Shadowheart from an equipment standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
So that was good times. That's what we did last time. Chris, let me tell you about my adventures in Stellar Blade. You're going to be equally proud of me and also like, God damn it, Brett. Okay, you ready?
No. Here we go.
So once I started New Game Plus and decided that I wanted to probably platinum this game, I started loosely following a guide. I played up until I got pretty close to the point of no return, the first point of no return. There were two. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to start checking the guide now and getting all the trophies knocked out besides the ones that require you to get things from the end game. What I failed to consider is that the guide says, at this point of the game, before you move forward past the point of no return, your camp should be at this number. Your Natiba scan should be at this number. And I was like, cool, my numbers match up. Good. Mm-hmm. What I didn't think about is New Game Plus carries that over. So it was already accounting for the two camps that are in the end of the game. And in my brain, I was like, oh, I'll get those whenever I go to end game. The problem with that is, since this is a JRPG and it's a point of no return, guess what the only trophy I have left in Stellar Blade is?
It's at the beginning of the game.
2 camps that I have no fucking clue where I missed them, because as far as I was thinking when looking at the guide, my math worked. Now I've got to play this game probably all the way through again. Actually, I know I don't have to play it all the way through. I have all of the camps, but I have to at least play it to the point of the first point of no return, basically, so that I can try and find these 2 camps. Now, there's a good thing here. I don't have to find all of the camps necessarily. If I can figure out which 2 I was missing, depending on where they're at, I can get them without having to activate the rest of the camps. But since I don't know where they're at and you only get certain areas as you progress in the game, I may have to play this game almost all the way through again. And I'm so fucking annoyed because of the fact that I thought I was doing everything right. I was like, cool, look, I'm following God. Chris will be so proud of me. I'm finally doing something. And I fucked that up.
No, I'm proud of you for stepping out of your comfort zone. You know, if you'd asked your guide sensei, Master Figueroa, I could have taught you a couple things about how to read a guide, how to read in general. But
hey, fuck you, Mr. Typo. You want to get here? You want to get here? I got dirty laundry. Let me air that shit.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So no, that sucks. I've had that same thing happen. That reminds me of a different situation, obviously, because yours isn't a glitch; it's user error in your part.
Yeah, 100% it is.
But that was like since Cyberpunk, where I did everything 100% of the game, and then I had to do it all again because the side quest progress doesn't carry over, and one single side quest was bugged, and the trophy is clear this entire district.
Ooh.
So I had to clear the entire district just over that single trophy.
It's pretty bad.
That was pretty brutal.
I feel for you.
I have the Cyberpunk Platinum, so take it or leave it.
Well, I've seen all the endings of Stellar Blade. I still really enjoy the game, and I went ahead and started New Game Plus again. Thankfully, so here's the upside. I don't have to do any side content on this run. I'm fucking taking this heroin and shooting it right through the center. You know, none of that tying the rope in a couple spots and trying to. No. I'm going mainline, right?
Just pull
So the upside, yeah, no tourniquet. Fuck it. But the upside is New Game Plus again carries over from where I was. So I haven't actually started to play yet, but I'm pretty sure my weapon level's like 32. So I'm going to be fucking destroying everything in this game because I'm so strong. So I'm just going to fucking mainline through and get to where I can try and figure out what camp I'm missing and hopefully have this platinum in maybe a couple of hours. But I'm so fucking bummed. I
know, I get that, dude. It sucks, but you live, you learn.
You live and you learn. That's right. Maybe one day I'll come around to just... I guess here's the real problem, Chris. The guide reads as if you're following the guide the first time through is the stupid part that I should have accounted a little bit more for.
Yeah, because I don't know. I feel like you and a lot of the people who don't look at these on a regular basis have the wrong idea of what they are. Because like when I say I played I've played every Uncharted game with a guide.
Yeah.
But the guide is not go here, do this. Sam Drake comes out and they play Single Ladies. You know, it's not that. It's like the guys I follow is like picture of collectible, short description of what you're doing. That way, like you'll get it. So like as long as you've gotten every treasure before that, the guide's easy to follow, but it's not disruptive.
Yeah. Well, let me explain to you this. I'm under no auspices that the thing is actually telling you what's happening and is actively spoiling the game for you. What I mean is more of like a conceptual spoiling, and where I'm not connecting with the game in the same way I would be if I were just playing it for the experience, separate of worrying about this extra thing. And so I'm not saying that's wrong on your point, but for me, I really like the feeling of just enjoying a game with this sense of like, oh, what's around this corner? What could be here? Because I already like exploring in games, right? I got a lot of the collectibles in Stellar Blade first time around. And so it was cool to kind of go back through the game and revisit it and get the few things I missed with a guide to show me the few that I just I do it like this. I ended up playing the game, doing all the side content, and when I hit a point where it was no longer obvious to me, like the cans and different things I was missing, then I hit the guide. I'm like, okay, now I'm at a point where clearly I'm still missing 10 cans or 7 cans or whatever, and I don't fucking have any idea where they are. So now we're going to hit the guide and go through and look at what cans I'm missing and just find, oh, can 36 is this one. It's in this spot. Cool. So yeah, it's not that I think that it's actually spoiling the game for you. More so, I think it's spoiling the experience, not from a content standpoint, like you're learning something ahead of time, just more that you're in it with a different mindset.
That's fair. I'll grant you that.
Yeah. It's like the difference between going to the movies by yourself and just being there and being like absorbed in the movie that you're watching versus going there with somebody who's really talkative.
I'll give you a very clear way of how I consume media. When I was watching Game of Thrones, I would realize, oh, I like this character. And then I would Google them, read the entire wiki, and then continue watching the show.
Yeah.
So
well, Chris, we've already determined that you are 100. Okay. You are very likely ADHD.
Yeah.
And we've also determined that the ADHD that we get taught about whenever we were young, which is that you can't focus on you basically you try and give 100% focus to 7 things at once and you just spiral off out of control and bounce around. That's what I always thought ADHD was. So if you would have ever asked me, I would have been like, no, I'm not ADHD. But then when you actually look and that ADHD can manifest in that way or in the fact that you just 100% sell yourself into one thing, that's the version that if I am ADHD, that's what I have.
Oh, I think you've misinterpreted me slightly. What I mean is I read their entire character arc from introduction, find out how they died. And
then you continue.
All of that. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you do get it. Yeah, it's great.
But it's really, it's because you had probably an ADHD tick that was like, I like this person. Now let me dive into them and learn everything about them, and then I can continue.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
And it's probably not even that. It's probably like, oh, let me look into them a little bit. And then you start reading and you're like, holy shit. And then you just keep going and suddenly you're like, I have now filled my brain with a bunch of information. I can continue.
That to a degree, but sometimes I would just go, does Jon Snow die?
I could never.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. It's a weird thing. Because even going back to that thing we talk about where I got just pissed at you for Spider-Man is because it was theoretical.
Hey,
everything I
felt
read.
Bad.
No, I know, but I'm saying like because I spoil myself on shit, but until I've seen it, it's theoretical, you know? And then I don't know how to explain it. But it's insane. It's insanity.
I got it.
What else have you been playing, Brad?
Man, that's it. Stellar Blade, Baldur's Gate 3. And much like you, I've been doing a bunch of other shit. So I built a bunch of patio furniture, got trees cut down and stumps cut down in my yard, redoing all my stuff so my wife has a nice place to do stuff outside. My daughter's birthday party is coming up. She wants to be at our house, so we're trying to make our house look better and doing things we've been putting off, like getting stumps removed and getting her old playset she couldn't fit and giving it away to somebody so that we can make room for a trampoline. So I've been busy.
You sound much more
entirely with gaming,
productive in a real life sense than I have been.
Well, what have you been doing?
No, just writing. So
there you go. That's productive.
I mean, hopefully it's productive.
Well, for anybody that's not in the Discord, do you want to illuminate them on what you're writing is in reference to?
Yeah, no. I just started writing short stories occasionally. I had been doing it as like something I wanted to do, where going into subreddits, like writing prompts and shit like that, and then following those. And I think the thing that I wanted to do with them was all of them have some relation to the world that we talked about before in the world of my my book. So it's all world building that, you know, if you do read everything I ever write, right, you'll have some knowledge of small things, but it's really just a way for me to practice, and hopefully people like what I'm writing and are intrigued. It's, you know,
so where can they
need
find
a platform. It's a Substack, so I think it's chrisfigueroa.substack.com, which I have to fix that name. So it's just I think there's one story right now which is about a baby who gets thrown off a cliff and comes back for revenge. And then there's one I'm editing that I just messaged Brent on Discord. I'm like, yo, just give me a writing prompt. And he did. And that was like a perfect example of the ADHD thing we've been talking about, right? You gave me that writing prompt, and I had it fucking done like 5 hours later. I was like, here you go, check it out.
You really did. You surprised me because I thought like maybe the next day or a few days would go by and you'd be like, hey, here's that writing. But hey, I'm proud of you, man. That's how you do it, right? Sometimes you get lost in the craft. It's kind of what we talk about when we have those moments of being a little disconnected from the industry as a whole, but looking at an individual level at why a game developer might be compelled to work overtime and crunch themselves with no outside pressure. Maybe they're just feeling it and they're like, fuck yeah, I really want to get this done because this is good and I know it is.
Yeah, and that's where I get when I write is like I'm less of an outliner. I'm more of like a pantser, as Stephen King would say, because I just I start with an idea and then I know where I want it to go. So I basically have a beginning and an ending. And then I just see how the characters get there. You know, it's funny because even what I wrote for you, like, not for you, but you know what I mean. What I wrote in that thing, you're
telling me the little inscription at the front of it that said, "To my dearest love, Brett," that was just fake? I thought you wrote that for me.
Yeah, but it's world building, you know?
But you're my world, bro.
And I'm building it, see?
Build it. Yeah. He will come.
Oh, God. But yes, I had started off with an entirely different ending than I got through. But I think the ending the ending where it's at is pretty interesting. I'll tell you once you finish reading it what the original ending was, and then maybe we'll publish it.
Nice. Well, hey, I'm partway through it, so I got a good chunk more to read, and I have a bunch to read from you. Is the problem, Chris? And not enough time. Clearly, dude. I'm telling you, I said it last week, but I felt so fucking busy like the past month. Yeah. I just feel like I have no time to do hardly anything, and then I sit down and I'm like, let's do the podcast, and I'm having a good time, but it's like this is one more thing in a litany of shit that I have to do. So it's been a real interesting ride because even I feel like I'm not actually scheduling my life, but I'm just like, okay, I got to try and make time to do the podcast. Got to try and make time to play some games. Got to try and make time to do this other thing I need to do. Got to try. It's like I'm trying to carve out little windows to do stuff without feeling actually scheduled. Because my day at work is more scheduled, so I try not to carry that home.
Dude, I mean, scheduling is a good thing. I used to do it, and that was when I was at my best. It's just I would schedule like, you're going to do this when you wake up, and this, and then this, and then it was like, okay, I've got everything going. But now it's up and down in my process because like if I get into an idea, it's going to fuck up my whole schedule. So I'm just like, I'll just do what I need to do on my days off, and if that means sitting here writing all day, fuck it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? Like that's kind of what I go through. And the reason I don't like to be scheduled at home is that I find that it keeps my life a little more interesting feeling to where I don't always know exactly what I'm going to do next outside of work. And that's a good feeling because like at work, I know what I have to do next. And so it's nice to kind of just wake up one day and be like, what are you going to do today? Like, I'll feel it out. And I'm I end up working. I don't know what it is in me, but I can't sit for too long. And I start being like, I got to actually do something of value and it's value from no one else's brain but mine. I'm like, this is not valuable enough. So I got to go do something with more value than this. And so that takes a day where like last week I was off because my kid was sick and couldn't go to school. And so we were off and ended up getting the patio furniture that I ordered in. And I was like, suddenly it became checking in on my daughter who was like on the couch in there. And then me just building fucking an entire thing of patio furniture, like a full L shape, this chair, this table and all this stuff, just building it. And then it was like, okay, same day, my mom takes over so that my wife and I can go on date night, which we usually do on Wednesdays. And so we go to Home Depot and I get a fan. And it's weird because it's actually pretty cool. It's like a ceiling fan, but it still has a plug so that you don't have to like hardwire it in if you don't want to. So we went and got that and immediately I got home and put it up. And I'm just like, I'm constantly doing shit. And I thought Saturday was going to be a lazy day for me. I woke up and played like an hour and a half of Stellar Blade, and then suddenly I was outside getting a fucking weather tarp and getting trees cut down and knocked out, and then trying to put ground stakes in and mount this tarp so that we can create shade. It was, I'm my brain is a fucking enigma in what it views my need to do.
I get that.
So there you have it. But yeah, let's get to talking about news real quick. There's not a whole bunch going on right now. So first thing we have here is Days of Play coming back around as they do every year. So Days of Play 2024 adds new PS2 classics to PlayStation Plus, which is cool. And PSVR 2 games are coming along to PS Plus as well. So June 2024's PlayStation Plus monthly games lineup were announced kind of alongside all of this. So for the bottom tier that everyone who has PS Plus gets, the monthly games are SpongeBob SquarePants: The Cosmic Shake, AEW Fight Forever wrestling game, and Streets of Rage 4, which is I guess a brawler, whatever you want to call that. So there goes those. But if you have, a PSVR 2 and you want to hop into some premium games for your premium subscription, you have some PSVR 2 titles by way of Ghostbusters: Rise of the Ghost Lord, Walkabout Mini Golf, which is an excellent game. Made Chris very sick, but still an excellent game. We have Synth Riders, Before Your Eyes, also an excellent experience that if you've never played and you don't know anything about is worth it. It is an experience. I don't want to say too much, but the basic premise of the game, Chris, you're muted. The basic premise of the game is that the game moves forward as you blink. And so it uses the eye tracking of the PSVR 2 to tell when you blink, and then it just moves the camera forward. It was a PC game beforehand, and you had to have a webcam if you wanted to play it this way. And it would look at you, and whenever you blinked, it would move the story forward. And it's such a simple idea, but it's really well pulled off, and it's a very cool game. Unfortunately, I played through the entire experience when trophies were bugged for the game, so I have 0 trophies for the game despite having beaten it.
Which pissed me off a little bit. I was going to ask,
Yeah, I don't know if it's been fixed yet either. And here's the problem with it. Fantastic game, fantastic experience. Not a game you're going to rush to go and replay, because a lot of what the game offers is the value of experiencing this very one-time thing. Going back through, it's not quite as cool to be like, oh, when I blink, it moves forward. There's a bunch of options you can choose from, but we'll see. Maybe I'll come back to it. And then lastly, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, both chapters 1 and 2, are joining the service. So finally, if you want some PSVR 2 action with your PS Plus, they're giving it to you. As far as PS2 games go, which is also for premium members, a weird mix, but a pretty solid one. You have Tomb Raider Legend, Sly Cooper, The Thievius Raccoonus, and Star Wars The Clone Wars. And these are all PS2, so these are specifically Sly Cooper playing the PS2 version, not the remaster. And from what I can tell, they have trophies. And then lastly, the following titles will be added to the PlayStation Plus game catalog for premium and extra, and that's Dredge, which will be available May 29th, Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, which will be available on May 31st, Cricket 24 on June 25th, or June 5th rather, and then Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the definitive edition, will be available on June 7th. So, as for their actual Days of Play sale, they have all their normal stuff going on. You have promotion that we'll see new avatars being added to PS5, just as something going on. There's sales events going on, including up to 30% off PlayStation Plus subscriptions, $50 off of PS5 consoles, $100 off of PSVR 2, and hundreds of discounted games. So if that sounds up your alley, go check that out. And PlayStation Plus members of any tier will receive a Roblox pack that includes an avatar for Felix Freezebeard, the Yeti.
Hell yeah.
It's always interesting seeing what they pull out of their ass to be like the little extra thing. Sometimes it's cool in the games that I like, and sometimes I'm like, I know other people are going to really like this, but it feels weird to me because you view the world through your own lens, kind of.
Very fair.
So there you have it. A couple of small things. Oh, actually, go ahead, Chris. What you got?
We have some late breaking news. It was posted in our Discord by shout out Josh Ayers. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance announces Slipknot collaboration. Jim Ojala showcases I don't know how to say these words, but there's Slipknot masks in Shin Megami Tensei 5 now.
What the fuck?
So that's cool. Is it? I'm gonna try. I don't know if these are Shin Megami names or they're the Slipknot guys' names.
No, these are not Slipknot people.
Garulu, Damon, and Loop Garu. These all sound like Pokemon and an IGN host.
I'm trying to see how this plays in the Slipknot. That's the thing that's getting me.
Well, they wear the masks, so I'm sure it's going to be the Slipknot masks in the game.
Maybe so. Either way, that's wild. Slipknot's doing some crazy stuff for their 25th anniversary, which is cool to see.
Is that them?
Yeah, you know it.
Is that them?
No, that's Disturbed.
Oh, well, I tried. I'm not a Slipknot guy.
Slipknot's Wait and Bleed, super emo boy song. My
issue, right, is that I progressed in metal past starter metal.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Slipknot was not.
And also, I'm gonna be honest. Early Slipknot is probably not starter metal. If anything, later,
and that's funny. I
Slipknot,
actually have heard that Slipknot, and that's the Slipknot I do like of the extreme metal of Slipknot.
It's pretty fucking wild. It's super energetic and chaotic and bouncy, and Iowa is full of some crazy shit and brutally heavy moments. If anything, starter metal Slipknot started at like Volume 3, which is also a banger of an album. Not any shade thrown at it at all. Volume 3 is an incredible album.
No, but it's pop music.
It's not pop music, but it's for Slipknot. It's definitely pushing into a more friendly sound in comparison to what came before.
Sure.
Yeah. So you should definitely you should just dig into self-titled Slipknot, which is their first album, in Iowa, and just see what you think.
All right. We'll do it.
And I want to start this by saying self-titled and Iowa are still completely different sounds. Self-titled's got way more rap energy going on.
Oh,
and
rap
Iowa is fucking brutal. No, it's like it's rap metal. I mean, I don't know. It's very chaotic and bouncy, but there's still a lot of screaming. It's interesting. You just have to listen.
Hell yeah.
So, okay, there you go. Breaking news. But moving on to the next thing, this is something that's really worth digging into if you find more of an interest to this, but I think it's worth shedding light on for just a second. So, a former Square Enix executive decided to talk about Final Fantasy sales expectations and budget realities. And there's a really in-depth thing that actually talked about what the Final Fantasy series has been hitting number-wise, what the expectations are, and why they're that way. And the whole thing actually goes into how much games are costing these days, how long it takes to develop a game, and why that is problematic towards cost. And then even looking at things like why gaming as a whole is seeming to get here. And also, I don't want to completely saying, let me read this excerpt of this article. So this is Twisted Voxel, and they said Novak or Navok, or whatever, however you say that word, pointed out, it's the name of the exec, pointed out that while the games industry is still growing in revenue, the revenue is increasingly captured by fewer live service games like Fortnite or Call of Duty Warzone. Older gaming audiences with disposable income but less free time either have the choice of paying $70 to spend 100 hours in the latest Final Fantasy title, or just continue playing Fortnite with their friends for free. The latter likely makes a more economical and socially compelling offer to many. Meanwhile, younger gaming audiences may not even be thinking about Final Fantasy, as they likely weren't engaged with the prior series and the prior entries. The last mainline Final Fantasy title, 15, was released in 2016, 7 years prior to 16, which is a pretty fucking long gap for a series that used to come out every year for a while, so wild thoughts. But yeah, if you have more interest in why the games industry kind of is where it's at, this is a really interesting thing to dig into and kind of see. We often talk about how weird Square Enix's expectations are, and this is not necessarily completely shedding light on why Square Enix reached those expectations, but it sheds a little bit of light, and it is informing in a sheer curiosity way. If you have it, it's worth looking into. I don't know if you looked much into it, Chris, but Fortniteization of gaming was something that kind of came from this thread of things. And I thought that was an interesting thing because talked about it, and I specifically have lamented it a little bit more than you, I think. But it does kind of feel like gaming is hitting this point where it seems like there's more and more reason to want to pull people towards this live service thing, because from a business standpoint on paper, it seems to be the thing that's going to make money. But I think it's really interesting that within this, he even says that less and less live service games are taking up more and more of the primary revenue increase, which to me points that the money is more in that sector of the industry, but that sector of the sector of the industry where that money's actually in is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's kind of coming into a really tight form of games. That what happens if those games stop? What happens to the industry if those games suddenly lose their moment in culture? I'm super curious to see how that happens. Like, I don't think it will happen overnight, but let's just pause it for a second. If Fortnite crashes overnight and suddenly no one gives a shit about it anymore, what happens?
People really get into Apex Legends, probably.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't.
Well, because what are you actually asking? Because what happens?
I'm really talking industry wide, both for players and for people who for consumer players and players in the business game of gaming. Like, what happens on both sides? Because Fortnite probably helps in how Epic is willing to let people use Unreal Engine in a pretty reasonable way and low cost, if not no cost, up to a certain number of sales, because they have enough overhead to make that a reality. But what happens if Fortnite just collapses? They have a lot of money, and of course, a lot of games are moving to Unreal. So I doubt that Epic as a whole goes under. But what happens at Epic Game Store?
Yeah, I guess I don't know, but to me, like, I guess my answer is that if Fortnite went away, that would be when I'd start worrying about a video game crash.
Well, if it went away overnight without a real reason that you can spot why.
Yeah.
Because I guess what you're saying is, like, if it went away gradually as you saw something else rise in its place, that feels like, okay, I see what's happening.
Yeah, that's just natural.
If in a very short period of time, Fortnite just kind of goes away.
Right. Like, if Fortnite just disappears and there's no, like, oh, this is why, that's, like, I think pretty scary.
That's kind of what I mean. Is like, there's so much tied to that, and I think a lot of what the expectations around gaming and its future is going to be is based around the idea that games can all make as much money as Fortnite.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily know that that's a healthy thought process, and I hope that most people aren't actually looking at it going, let's get into gaming because gaming can make as much money as Fortnite, because that's clearly not normal.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not actually a businessman. I was thinking the other day, how hard it must be for self-employed people to really determine the best way to price stuff and how to make money and how to value their time and their knowledge, and then charge that while still charging a rate that people are willing to pay and that will keep them in business. Because there's no point in being self-employed if you charge so much for your time and knowledge that you might be worth, but no one's willing to pay it. So you think about how that comes into this. It's like, how do you determine how to price a game? Like, real talk. We can postulate on the show all day long about how it makes sense for certain games to be certain prices because of length and all these different things. But how do you really determine how to price a game?
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
Neither do I. Who was looking at Helldivers in a boardroom or fucking who knows, a break room, and was like, this game, guys, we should probably do this game at $40. How did you reach that? Is that like extensive math and accountants saying what your best bet of return is? Is that focus testing to see, like, hey, what would you be willing to pay for a game like this? And, I guess that goes to show how ignorant to the industry we really are, because a lot of that stuff happens without our knowledge.
Yeah, to me, I would think it's just whichever. I don't know. I mean, I think you have to look at something like Helldivers and be like, what could we sell this for 70? Like, you have to think like, do we make more losing $30 and selling more, or gaining that $30 but selling less? And I think that's the calculus, right?
That's what I always think, but that would make you think a lower price and bigger bulk should always be your go-to.
But not necessarily.
Hardly anyone does that, right?
Because if these aren't exact numbers, but in my head, you would need to have sold. I think you'd need at least 1 million more players than you would at 70 than you would at 30 or 40. I think that's about right.
Well, you think about it, right? At 40 versus 70, day one, talking about full price, right? No discounts, no nothing else. We're looking at it. At $70, everybody who buys the game is getting very close to a 1.5. It's at 40, right? So if you sell it at 70, it's almost like 1.5 person bought it every time. Is that enough value to throw off the people who might have actually bought it at 40 without being this half person?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think the value, I don't know, man. It all depends on what you expect your player numbers to be. And I think it's just a matter of, you have to think until these lines cross, it's not worth going to 40 until we can get here. And the question is, can we get to the crossing area? And if you think you can get to or past the crossing, then yeah, give it that $40 discount.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one of the go-to games, and it's very different because it's not a multiplayer game, so word of mouth is going to be a lot different. But I always thought it was really surprising that when Sony finally came back with Sly Cooper on PS3 era, very into PS3 Vita, with Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, that game was a $40 game, which at the time was like, whoa, a AAA exclusive from Sony for $40? That wasn't normal. And what's funny is that even at $40, a price that you would assume would make that game seem more accessible, more approachable, that game sold very poorly. And so you almost wonder, would it have been more valuable to charge $60 for the game because the same number of people who were really hyper fans that wanted more of this series were going to buy it regardless of if it was 40 or 60? Because I can tell you, I would have bought it at 60, no problem. It being at 40 was just a benefit to me. And so it almost like, would the game have essentially done better? It still wouldn't have been a success, but would the game have done better if they sold roughly the same amount and just charged $60? Probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I mean, I think the same argument goes the opposite way, right? Are we going to hit this line? And once the line's crossed, you think you can charge whatever you want as long as the line's crossed, right? In terms of pure business.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't. It's complicated, but like I said, if it's something you want to start trying to dive your head into, anybody who's listening, yeah, go check out. There's plenty of places that are reported on this. It's worth looking into. It's really a weird idea to kind of get even a slight peek into a company that to many people is mysterious. Square Enix does a lot of stuff that we don't understand. So, if you have been interested in Silent Hill Transmission is coming on May 30th at 4 p.m. PDT, and this will be where Bloober Team will share game updates, a deeper look at the film that's coming up, Silent Hill's new movie, and new merch will be announced. So this is going to be very similar to the last time we got a Silent Hill big update. This is just looking at the franchise as a whole, including Silent Hill 2 Remake and anything else that has not quite hit for Silent Hill just yet. So, Chris, I assume, because we were talking about this at other card night, you've seen the Silent Hill movie, correct? The 2005, whatever it was.
Some of it, yeah.
Oh, dude, you should actually watch it. It's a pretty solid movie. It's a weird adaptation. But we were talking, and I can't tell if it was I'm pretty sure it was in the uncut, like the unrated version. But there's a part where this girl's running beside Pyramid Head on some stairs, and Pyramid Head just fucking grabs her. And as she's screaming, he yanks her clothes off of her and then takes his hand, puts it like in the center of her chest, like crimples like his fingers together to like pull the tautness out of the skin, and then just fucking torques her entire skin off in one second. It's such a wild fucking scene for a video game adaptation and a fucking 2005 movie. It's so wild, but it's also to this day. Silent Hill looks pretty damn good effects wise. They did a lot of interesting things, and that still looks pretty fucking convincing. And it's brutal, and it's pretty.
I'll
wild.
have to give it a watch. It sounds good. I've heard it's like legitimately a good movie.
Oh, it's a great
the
movie.
best Silent Hill adaptation. So.
Yeah, I mean, of course, because there's not been a lot of adaptations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny what it chooses to get right about the world and the ideas that it's trying to portray versus some of the later games. Even a game like Silent Hill Origins, which is an okay game, but it's like it doesn't fully understand what Silent Hill is, which has been a problem since the Japanese studio stopped working on it, Team Silent or whatever they were called. There's kind of just been a problem where I don't think anybody completely knows what the series is trying to be. They just keep trying different shit and being like, will this work? Will this work? And so far, nobody's really got it. And I think that's why people who were big fans of it were such big, like they were very ravenous about PT, because PT at least had a vision that Silent Hill had lacked up until this point. Even if it was different, it was like, well, at least it has a clear vision of what it's trying to be. So,
yeah.
Who knows?
I'll give it a watch.
This last one, before we kind of go to the rest of the news we have here, is a quick one. Take-Two CEO is highly confident that Grand Theft Auto 6 will hit its fall 2025 release window. Rockstar are seeking, quote, perfection in making this new entry in the long-awaited new entry in the new series, or in the long-running series. As we know, I don't have a lot of interest for Grand Theft Auto 6, but I do have interest in whether this game is actually going to hit its release window, because if we end up keep going and do another Metacritic thing, this will be an up-in-the-air game. And I'm going to tell you, with the way game release schedules have been, I am not confident in choosing this game.
I'm just going to put it out there now. That game has to be pick one. Even if it doesn't come out, it has to be pick one. That's like a shoe-in 95.
Clearly, you're right. But, that also depends on how forgiving you want to be in being able to drop games. I really want to do a year where you can't drop shit. What you have is what you have, and you just deal with it. But
I'm good with that. I just think it sucks that you wouldn't be able to add something down the line. Like, not that either of us did, but like, if one of us was savvy enough to take Animal Well once it got a release date,
Yeah,
I think that's fun. But maybe we just do that, but no drops at all.
Maybe it's no drops, but you can add.
Yeah, you have to add 5 or something
which is
like that.
Very similar to the first year, in all honesty. Because I couldn't get rid of Redfall. And, it kind of became apparent that game was not looking too hot.
It did.
But I was like, maybe they'll still pull through. And they didn't.
I don't know why you thought that, dude.
Well, at that point, it's like, what are the stages of grief? It was denial.
Yeah, you're in denial and bargaining.
I was like, well, I already have it. I can't do shit. I can't bargain out of it. So here I am in denial. It'll be good. It'll be good.
That's hilarious.
All that to be said, I still didn't hate that game, but I also didn't love that game. And it is hands down the worst game that Arcane's ever put out. So do with that information what you will. All right, so moving on to the rest of the news we have here. This next one, actually, I'm going to just a short one real quick too. So Hunt Showdown is dropping support for the PS4 and Xbox One in August. So this comes from, why can't I think of the name of that studio right now? The people behind Crytek, that's what it is. The people behind Crysis. This is one of those weird games that kind of pulled them back onto the scene when they weren't doing too hot. So interesting to see. This game has still been going on this long, but yeah. Finally getting rid of that cross-gen support. You will only be able to play this on next-gen consoles moving forward, which means the game is still alive and healthy, and they want to keep updating it without having to worry about the old consoles.
Yeah. I mean, it's about time. Leave them in the dust.
Yeah. So there's one more we're going to get to here, and then we're going to talk about Game Pass just a little bit. So this next one's kind of interesting. Xbox has reportedly signed the next game from Sefton Hill and Jamie Walker, according to sources at Xputer. So those names may sound familiar to you if you are savvy enough to keep up with the games industry and the team behind Rocksteady, who have opened their new studio after leaving Rocksteady called 100 Star Games. While the studio isn't officially announced, it's listed on Indole, a site that houses business information, with the two listed as the founders. So arguably this is all speculation, but there's no reason to think that this is wrong. Which brings us to the point, and something I've been seeing bounce around the internet all day. What do you think the goal of this signing is? Do you think this is strictly a publishing to still let this game come everywhere? And we're going to see Xbox continue to push into that? This is a gut check entirely on you. Do you think that this is a game that is going to cross into the multi-platform era? And I really ask because how long before we even see this game? If they're just now signing this thing over, this game's probably not very far along.
Well, the
in
studio
3
doesn't
years,
even really exist.
let's call it 3 years, 3 to 5 years. We hear about this game. Is this a multi-platform announcement or what? Gut check.
I'm going to answer with 3 words. Okay. The whole slate.
So everything by that point.
I will put money on this. I will have platinumed Gears of War in its entirety before this is announced.
Jesus. Well, there you have it. Yeah, look, I'm with you. But it's also, I've been this way since Blade was so obviously not pointed. That was like the first real sign of like, there's a reason.
That if we when we look back at this, and I think what'll be fun is we can do like a retrospective episode down the line, talk about all this. That has to be the moment. That one trailer was the moment everyone should have known.
And what's funny is you saw everybody kind of be like, what the hell's up with that?
Yeah, but it was funny because you'd see people like, I don't remember exactly if you said anything, but like Jez and like that group, like the Xbox
being like,
group,
no, clearly
like,
it's coming to
obviously
Xbox only.
it's made by Arcane. They're owned by Bethesda. And now you look back at it, it's like, it was so clear that that game was not exclusive.
Well, let me say this. If anything, I don't want to say that, but if anything, I think it was so clear and that game was so far off that I think it points to the fact that they didn't want to say exclusive as a means to the fact that somewhere behind the scenes, conversations were going on. No,
actually, strong disagree. Because
really?
Because Sea of Thieves had to have already been in development by the time this was announced. So they knew this strategy shift was coming.
I'm with you, but I'm saying I don't think they knew to what degree they want this strategy shift to go, whether it's going to be an all or if it was going to be a test the waters, pun intended, Sea of Thieves.
Nice.
But yeah, I think that that's kind of where they were. They knew that they had a slate of games coming that were going to cross. And they weren't ballsy enough to say that they were going to do it with everything, because why take that PR right now when you haven't even announced the other one? So instead, just be coy about announcing a system for this. And you look, I would be honest, from a PR standpoint, all you have to say to brush this off is, well, this game is easily 5 years out, and we don't know what console it's going to be on at that point. So we chose not to announce a console, because if we say Series X, but by the time this comes out, Series X is kind of 2 of the past, then we don't want to be locked at that console. You can PR spin your way out of this so easily, and I actually think there was somebody who tried doing something close to that. But yeah, even if it wasn't someone officially from Microsoft, people who are invested in Xbox as a concept were doing that PR work for them.
The whole slate.
The whole slate. Yeah. I'll tell you this much. I pretty much agree with you, but I think in 3 years' time, we'll at least have an answer from Microsoft as to whether we should expect everything or just some games. I think that it won't be so cloudy. I think we'll have a pretty good idea.
I think we'll have a pretty good idea in 11 days.
Yeah. I'm real curious to see what's coming.
Do you think they'll announce anything coming to PlayStation on that stage? Like Doom Year Zero, does that end with Xbox, PlayStation, PC? Or does it just end with Xbox and Game Pass, and then they announce it in the Xbox blog?
Man, I don't know. Because here's the thing. We already see this right now. This is where I'm going at. Third-party marketing deals right now already only show the console that they made a marketing deal with, right? So if you see Grand Theft Auto, you're probably going to see for Grand Theft Auto 6 a PlayStation marketing tag, most likely, if we're being honest, right? That's something Sony's clearly going to push for. And when you see the trailer, it's going to say PlayStation at the end. Clearly, it's not a PlayStation exclusive, but PlayStation wants the moments where marketing looks as though this is a PlayStation game. This is where you're going to play it. Even though general people know that's not the case. I think even with games coming across on everything, I think Microsoft will still have their moments to be like, no, this is an Xbox game. We're marketing it as Xbox first with the understanding that it will come to other consoles. But I don't know. I'm still curious if we're there right now. I think Bethesda looks like Microsoft's clear point of being able to say, well, okay, Microsoft's kind of already done this with Activision, of ability to say, well, we bought Activision, so any of the Activision studios can just be multi-platform, because they already were. Bethesda's a little different because they had a chance to do that when they first bought them, and they decided to double down and say, no, Bethesda games are exclusive.
True.
So I'm curious to see if they'll open the door for Bethesda and say, well, no, any Bethesda and Activision, since they were big publisher Activisions, will continue to be multi-platform. But any first-party games moving forward that aren't live service will remain exclusive, like Halo and Gears, which gets complicated, right? Because there's aspects of...
And Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be curious to see, man. I really don't know what's going to happen. But so far, no massive game has come over. If we're being like, you know what I mean? Like,
I would argue
Sea of Thieves is arguably a massive game, but it's live service. So it's kind of like you talking about why the hell not put Helldivers 2 on Xbox eventually.
Sure. I don't know. We don't need to go on a diatribe about Xbox. We'll do that enough another day, but
we're about to for a different reason.
True.
Yeah.
I do think the rumors that are coming out now of the next Xbox being a quote unquote reference machine kind of says everything you need to know.
I was going to talk to you about that. I actually haven't seen any of the reports, but I've seen a few people saying that there's rumors about how Xbox is moving to basically a Steam machine or whatever. What were they called back when Steam tried the same thing? Steam Box?
Steam Machine?
Or the Steam Machine?
I think it was Steam Machine, but you might be right.
Either
about
way,
Steam Box. It's one of those.
Yeah, same idea, right? A box that has like a reference point where other people can make something that's similar, but all games should work across them. Do you really? Do you think that's going to be their marketing plan? Let me ask you this. You as a consumer, let's not even get into the business thought of why Xbox may be doing this. From you as a consumer, do you think Xbox doing this and letting other people release Xbox branded consoles with their own specs, do you see value in that? What, for you as an individual, do you think that would make you more likely to buy an Xbox branded product?
No.
Why?
Because what the rumors
Let's
are
pretend
describing...
you didn't just buy a $2,500 laptop, but
I was about to say
they can do a bunch of shit. But
what they're talking about, at least in the rumors, is a PC.
Mm-hmm.
I have one. I have two, actually. So, no, I'm not going to be buying this, especially if my prediction is right and the whole slate does start moving over. Like, there's no reason.
Let me ask you this.
Okay.
Steam Deck has been surprisingly successful for Steam. What do you think the chances are that Steam views Steam machines, or whatever they were called, as they were a little too early to market for an idea that actually could work for them? What do you think the chances are that Steam goes back into the idea of releasing individual, maybe even from themselves, like, hey, here are basically a higher quality Steam Deck where it's a set number, it's a set architecture, but we have this overlay that we build for it. We have this thing where we can hyper optimized games for this set of architecture that we've built, and you buy it and you can play all these PC games on it, and it's super scalable. And users can create profiles so that you can easily install them from a common library. What do you think the chances are that Steam revisits that idea and that kind of steals a little bit of Xbox's thunder? Because I have long thought Steam Deck's success points to the fact that people are willing to buy Steam things to make PC gaming easier, which was the idea for Steam machines. I just don't think it was the right time.
I don't know. I don't see why they would when they're basically selling a Steam console right now
With Steam Deck, because it's dockable.
I would just, if I was them, I would just release a fucking $3,000 Steam Deck. Like I would
Which they're about to come out with a Steam Deck sequel, right? Like that's essentially a more powerful Steam Deck.
Maybe that's what the rumors are. Yeah. If it was me, bam, we've got a $300, $500, $1,000, $3,000 Steam Deck. Have fun.
Chris,
here's your liquid cooled 4090 Ti Steam Deck.
I almost forgot the community stake. We'll come back around to it, but I did forget it when we should have had it. But we can finish this conversation up right there real quick. But I just thought that was interesting because everything that Xbox does, it's about building a brand. But what are they building a brand toward right now? It seems like the answer to that's Game Pass still. Clearly, they put enough eggs in that basket. That's what they're trying to go toward. Or I don't know how to say this, and not in an exclusive sense, but in a, why would you go specifically to an Xbox product rather than playing an Xbox production on another product? You know, why would you choose to buy something Xbox branded rather than play Sea of Thieves or wait for the game to hit another console if that seems likely? And so you got to try and figure that out. And so you start to think that it has to be that they want something like Steam where you're buying the game from them. But that can't be entirely true. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep putting their games on Steam. But they're doing that because path of least resistance on PC. People want the games on Steam because it's better curated. The Microsoft Store on PC kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that not as a hit towards Xbox at all. The Microsoft Store where you have to download these things, quite literally, is fucking terrible. It's so complicated to download the Halo Master Chief Collection from the Microsoft Store, you might as well not even try. You go to Steam, you buy it, they download, no problem. You go to your Xbox console, you buy it, you download it, no problem. Some reason on the Microsoft Store, it's a fucking pain in the ass, and that's not the only game that has that issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I just think that... I don't know, man. Look, the Steam Deck is just such a dominant thing that I just don't see a need for a Steam console. That's really my biggest takeaway.
And you have the fact that you designed it with that in mind. Stockable. You can play it as the console if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Just bring up the power.
Yeah.
And
we'll see how that ends up going. It's just a Steam Deck the same size as your fucking gaming laptop.
I hope that. Let's see. Could I game? I guess I could.
You're just holding this device that's shoulder width apart.
In other words, the Wii U Pro controller or the Wii U controller.
Honestly, I think the Steam Deck may be similarly sized to the Wii U controller.
Well, that's the funniest thing. Everyone talks shit about the Wii U controller. You want to talk about ahead of its time.
Oh, 100%.
The Wii U, terrible games aside, ahead of its time. Speaking of, the one game I've never played on the Wii U?
I have to fight you for a second.
Okay.
Wii U, considering the fact that it did not sell well, actually has a kind of monstrous library. It's really surprising.
You really into Devil's Third?
Look, they're not games that I have as much pull for, but there's a lot of big entries for big franchises that hit that system and are great games for people who enjoy those series.
For sure. I mean, the Ouya had Towerfall, so I'm not saying
that's why pretty much all of those games came to Switch.
Yeah,
is exactly that reason, because they were great games on a console that no one was going to buy them on.
Well, the sad thing is the one Wii game that I do want to play that I've never played and has not been re-released is Mad World, and I really want to try that game. Is it Mad World? Yeah, it's Mad World.
It was on original Wii.
I want to play that game so bad. I've still never done it. It's been like 28 years or whatever. But
hey, man, I'm so glad I can finally play Epic Mickey. Because
right?
Epic Mickey 1 is a fucking Wii exclusive.
Yeah. Dude, I wanted,
and I love the game.
How do you feel about the PS3 being a retro console? How does that make you feel in your gut?
Oh, I think it checks out.
Yeah, but doesn't it?
I think what's really weird is that people are going to have a hard time, which I think this happens almost every time. I'm sure the moment that a PS1 came into being a retro console, people were like, well, this isn't even nearly the level of retro game. This is too big of a technological jump to want to count it. And then I'm sure when PS2 came in, they're like, how can this be retro? The group of people who are going to complain are going to complain.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting from a technological perspective. PS3 joining that list of retro games is kind of an actually wild technological jump.
It is. God damn. I feel old. I got a retro console still set up.
Retro games being an HD natively and not because of being re-released is kind of crazy.
It is.
To think of HD now then is retro. High definition is retro.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like, I love retro games like Super Mario 64, Infamous, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Fallout 3. It's nuts.
I think every console has to a degree this, but I do think PS3 has an iconic library.
Definitely.
Yeah, and not just from an exclusive, which I mean, again, PS4 is the same. There's so many bangers on PS4. I'm not trying to belittle PS4 at all, but it's interesting. I think maybe Chris, maybe we say that because those were games that were really important to us at a very pivotal time in life.
Well, I think it's just that because we grew up with it. I don't know. I feel like as I've grown older, I still don't consider myself as gotten older. You know what I mean? So
sure,
like,
no one thinks that they're older.
Right.
You know what the worst thing about becoming an adult is? Like a real, like starting to hit 30s, going up more, is I start to realize that my mom, when I was 6 years old, my mom was, or maybe 8, whatever, my mom was my age now.
Yeah.
And I know she didn't think she was old. She didn't think she was older. She didn't think she was any different. She thought she was still a hip young person. And here a little 6-year-old me is like, psh, this loser doesn't know anything.
Yeah, you're fucking lame. Yeah, I get that with teachers a lot because a lot of people.
I was actually a mom's boy, so I'm not gonna act like that. My parents divorced at 6. I was with my mom. I like my mom. I was probably closer to 8 anyway, if I'm thinking correctly. But you kind of always are at that age. I feel like kids kind of like my parents don't know anything.
Yeah. Well, the getting older thing always hits me with teachers, especially because now there's a lot of my friends who I got obliterated with or committed actual crimes with who are teaching the future of America. And I'm like, oh, good, this is good. I saw you puke on your floor and then fall asleep. Enjoy class tomorrow.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about teachers? Teachers have a crazy keen ability to remember and recognize an adult version of a kid they have not seen. Dude, my first grade teacher saw me a few years back and she was like, oh my God, Brett. And I was like, how the fuck? And like, realistically, I know that I look an awful lot like I did as a kid, plus a beard. That is it. My hairline's a little more receded, but I look very similar to it as I did it. I don't feel like everybody I know does. Sometimes I do look at people's kid pictures and I'm like, that you're not the same person. But teachers blow my mind. How can you recognize and call by name somebody that you haven't seen in 20 years?
Yeah, I had that with a second grade teacher and I was like, holy Christ, it's impressive.
That is wild. Ugh.
Does the community have a take on this?
The community has a take, but it's on something different. So the community's take this week was actually based around this conversation that's just kind of been floating around with Hellblade 2. So Hellblade 2 in particular has been, to a lesser degree than some games, but it's been a divisive game in many ways. And The community stake I ended up doing was with Hellblade bringing forth a discussion around divisive games. What is a generally divisive, if not outright poorly received game that you really enjoyed and why? So, Chris, I'm going to go through these first, but then I want to hear yours and I want to give mine as well because I've read most of the answers and I like them, but I am a little surprised that there wasn't as much variation or surprises that I was hoping for. So, Jehudi MD, longtime listener, longtime patron, says probably Anthem from recent memory. Both critically and commercially, this game was doomed. I know it sold close to 3 million or so, but that was it. The game was dead within a year. I was looking forward to Anthem 2.0, but unfortunately that never materialized. I enjoyed it for the gameplay. The flying mechanics were so intuitive and felt fun to fly around the world. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to explore, and I can understand why people were not happy with it. I'm right there with you, man. I really liked Anthem, and even though I liked the multiplayer elements of it, I wish that game would have not been designed as a games as a service title. And I wish if they would have taken all those mechanics and made a primarily single player game with a multiplayer side faction like that you can go do. And they didn't. And that's okay. So, Chris, did you play Anthem at all?
I remember going through the waterfalls.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And that was about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't play much, but you played a little bit.
No, I played it after it was dead. And I think I played it in a party with someone, maybe even you. And I think the one thing that was said to me was there's not a ton to do other than go for the platinum. And that's going to take a long time. And I think I just turned it off after that.
Yeah, it wasn't me. I did end up getting the platinum. I strictly from enjoying playing the game. Like, that was one of those games where I went about the platinum because I had done so much in the game that pretty much the only thing I needed to do to platinum the game was find the rest of the collectibles.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And it took a few hours because collectibles are like they randomly appear in the world. They're not static.
Great. Yeah, thank you, EA.
So you got to fly around in a circle to areas where they can pop up and hope that when you stop, there's one that's there because they're not traditional collectibles. They're like logs and text things. And it's fucking weird. It's a really weird fucking idea.
You're right. The non-traditional audio log collectible.
Well, but I mean, it wasn't like an item, but yeah, you're right. It's still fucking wild. I don't know why they landed on that. But
that's funny.
I guess the idea was that it was there sometimes to act as though people were moving through this world when you weren't around. But I don't think it sold that idea so much as it just frustrated anybody looking to actually get into the world.
Fair enough.
So do what you will with that. Over on Twitter, we got one from Sean Horn who said Terminator Resistance. It's a very good game with nice combat, but nobody I knew played it or even really heard of it. Well, guess what, Sean? I played it. I platinumed it. I fucking loved it. I championed it on this show. And then I played RoboCop from the same developers. And I loved it. And I platinumed it. And I championed it on this show.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you love that game.
And hey, guess what, Sean? I also played it, platinumed it, and championed it on the show.
No, for real, Terminator Resistance is
it's a great game.
It's a great game, but you got to be careful because I'm not saying it's the next Grand Theft Auto or fucking The Last of Us or anything. It's just a really fucking fun game.
See, and that's the problem with modern gaming is that you had to qualify. Yeah, it's
which
fun.
Is so stupid.
It's so fun. Stupid. Is like should be like the base description, right?
Yeah.
If I don't come to you and say, "Yeah, it's fun," you should play it. All games
the problem is
should be fun.
The game is great because it's fun and it has enough care for the Terminator license that if you're a fan of Terminator, you can see that love in it. And if you're not a fan of Terminator, it doesn't really matter.
So it's interesting because obviously I'm a Sacred Symbols listener, and Colin talked about once that he doesn't necessarily play games for fun. Do you agree? Like he was talking, I think it was specifically The Last of Us, where he was like, I didn't have fun playing that game, but I was entertained. Paraphrasing the man, of course.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Okay, because what I was about to say is you can have fun in roundabout ways that are not directly tied to the idea of fun, but in retrospect, you're like, that was an engaging time.
Right. Well, isn't anything
because like you're right.
fun?
I didn't play The Last of Us 2 because it's a tale of two games. The Last of Us 2 is actually incredibly fun combat. It's
fun.
Super fun gameplay. But if you're actually looking at the game as a whole and what you feel as you're experiencing the game, that game is dreadful. The Last of Us Part 2 in particular is dreadful. It's fucking weighty and super emotionally heavy. And then the combat's fun, but you think about the combat kind of after you've beat the game and you're reflecting and you're like, oh, well, the combat was really fun. But while you're playing the game, you're just like, fuck, man, this is heavy.
It's like, oh, God,
I was engaged in the game and I was entertained by that engagement, and being entertained is fun. Ergo, I played that game for fun.
Yeah, and that was kind of where I would take that question, right? Is like, I remember listening to it and being like, I get what you're saying, but I don't agree, because if I'm entertained, I'm having fun. That doesn't mean I'm like having fun in a traditional sense. You know, like watching a horror movie is fun, but in a different way than getting a blowjob is fun, which is a different way than playing a baseball game is fun, which is a different way than sitting outside having a campfire and drinking a beer is fun. But since they all entertain you, they are all some level of fun. Right? I can't think of anything I wouldn't describe as fun that is also entertaining, or something I do for entertainment.
Right? Well, okay, let's take it a step back. When you write, writing is not in and of itself fun. No. The challenge of figuring out where to go and how to write it well is engaging, which stimulates you, and the stimulation of that is fun.
See, I don't think that's what it is for me. I'm weirdly disassociative, which I think is why I can listen to our show as if I wasn't on it.
Clearly.
Because like I don't know if I've talked about it, but I've like laughed at my own jokes, but not like a consciously like that was funny, I'm funny, but because like I thought what was said, it's just weird.
Like you had an out of body experience around it, where like you heard it as if you didn't know that you said, and you were like, oh, that was good.
Exactly. It's as if I'm listening to Sacred Symbols, but it's our show. You know what I mean? And
you're a fucking maniac.
It's weird.
I love you.
but I do it with writing too, where like a lot of the enjoyment I get out of writing is just I get to read the story afterwards. And it goes into like where we talked about earlier, where I pants write like a lot of the time. Like I know the full arc of my book and where I want all these characters to end up, but that doesn't mean that's where they're going to go. So like I'll spend a day write like 5,000 words, and then I'll just go for a drive and listen to it, because Word lets you do like AI reading of it, and it's as if I, now that I've listened to the book like 40 times, it's different.
But let me loop this back into what I'm saying. If you listen to what you wrote and then you hated it, you'd be like, oh fuck.
Sure, I would definitely have to fix that.
But you listen back to it and it's good, and so you're pleased with yourself because you overcame the challenge of trying to write this thing in a way that's pleasant or pleasing to some degree, or engaging, or whatever it be. And so you complete the cycle that way, and it goes back to being, it was fun. It was a fun experience because at the end of it all, your reflection on it was, I was engaged, and which stimulated me, which was fun.
Yeah, I mean, and the fun comes in different ways, right? The fun comes from finishing a satisfying character arc, or like last night when I was finishing the ending of the short story I wrote yesterday. I was like, this came together way better than I expected, and that was fun. Just being like, I wrote my 2,000 words today, because that's one of the things I try and write at least that.
And
much.
Fun is a hard thing to. Fun's a concept, right?
Yeah, because.
And that's why when people are like, well, walking simulator games aren't fun, I'm like, well, that just depends on what you find fun. If you get really engaged in the storytelling of a walking simulator game, essentially, which a lot of games are, like a good example, What Remains of Edith Finch doesn't really have a lot going on gameplay-wise. And yet, I had a blast playing that game. Super fun. Really engaging. Good time. Like, by the time I was done, I was like, man, I was really invested in what was going on, which had my brain stimulated, which had me in an intrigued mood. And so by the time of that, it's like I reflect back on those feelings, and those feelings were good, and good feelings kind of equals fun.
It's kind of like MLB.
And what's weird is bad feelings can also equal fun. It's the weird thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because MLB, like while I'm playing it, there's times where it's definitely boring, but then you unlock once I unlocked this JD Martinez card, all the grinding of just boring event games I did, worth it, and that's what makes it all fun come together. You know what I mean? Like running a raid 85,000 times. I get it. I hear it. I hear that I'm a hypocrite with Destiny. Okay, Velvet, we've mentioned Destiny 2 for you.
What's funny is I said dopamine, but this is like your fucking. This is like the telltale heart where you just knew deep down that you were being a hypocrite towards games like Destiny, and I said dopamine, and you heard Destiny because you're fucking guilty, and you know it.
Well, it's also because like I've acknowledged and I know what I talk about. If I replace JD Martinez card with Gallahorn and no other words, I would have just been talking about Destiny 2. I've been playing these event games trying to grind for Gallahorn, and they've been boring. I got
Gallahorn, suddenly it was worth it.
Exactly. It's just Destiny 2. So it's the same.
That goes into a weird thing, right? Delayed gratification. Mm-hmm. Things that are boring, if you get the result you wanted, suddenly become fun retroactively.
Yep. Platinums. Great example.
Yeah, because you'll be like, I'm fucking hating this trophy, and that platinum pops, and you're like, oh yeah, that was fun.
When I was grinding to find Mjolnir, grinding is extensive. When I was doing just random dives over and over again to find Mjolnir and Dave the Diver, I was appalled at the game. Like, this is bullshit. I'm bored. And then I got it, and I was just like, oh, this is fucking awesome. 138. It's posted in the Discord. Woo!
Yeah. That's funny, man. All right, let's go a few more. We have Jason G, who reached out to me recently. Hope you're doing well, man. He said, easy, Mad Max, which has been a game of discussion lately because of Furiosa and apparently George Miller having some not so positive things to say about the game.
Yeah, I've got a take about that.
Yeah, so he says, I think its biggest issue was that it was overshadowed by Metal Gear Solid: The Phantom Pain. It's unfortunate it released at the same time, but he was fortunate enough to play both. And I have to say, Mad Max was a lot of fun. It had Arkham-esque combat system, can upgrade your car, open world, and he loved it. And that was mirrored by Mr. Sweet Gran Turismo, now Sweet Hiking Jones. Mad Max was excellent and resembles what I wish PlayStation would do with a new Twisted Metal. So it's an interesting idea.
What's he playing?
What are you talking about?
He changes his name based on what he's playing. Is he playing a short hike?
He's playing IRL, man. He's playing being out in nature hiking, even though that would actually be... Yeah, his profile picture is him in nature with a backpack with pins on it, and there's no way. To be fair, he's wearing a Death Stranding Bridges shirt and a Gran Turismo hat. So my guy's repping. But Chris, there's this thing called nature that you can go out and experience.
Oh, they had that in Death Stranding, right?
They do, yes.
Oh, okay.
The irony is looking at this picture for his Twitter profile, it kind of looks like the grass hills from Death Stranding.
That's funny.
Like the little rocky grass areas.
That's funny.
Yeah, he's just delivering shit. His backpack is full of packages.
Congrats on your hike, I guess.
Hey man, hiking.
I hope he comes back and he's like, "No, Brett, you're fucking wrong. I was playing a short hike,
which is an excellent game.
It is a good game.
Everybody should play a short hike if you haven't. All right, we got a couple more. Speaking of Sweet Hiking Jones, he says, I guess Mud Runner would be mine, a game we probably wouldn't have gotten if PS4 wasn't so easy to develop on. A game I would have checked out on PC if I did such things. It's basically Death Stranding without the story. Slow terrain traversal, so relaxing and challenging.
Okay, I'm going to download that right now. Throw me the Death Stranding.
Chris is like, wait a minute, Death Stranding and no story, so I can ADHD out on other content? Let's go.
$6.99.
There you go. A great entry-level price, too.
Fantastic deal.
If you've never, if that sounds like a good time to you, go buy Mud Runner. It's apparently on sale. Yeah, no, I've heard him talk about that game plenty of times, but yeah, I've seen people play it too. That is the game. Difficult terrain. Get out of that shit. Get to where you're going. That's it.
Now, where do you keep the baby in Mud Runner?
Okay, so it's in the tire, and when the BBs come up, a little antenna comes out of the car and just yeah. And the entire time you're driving, you can kind of hear the baby going, dunk, 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 dunk.
You're giving it a concussion.
Well, okay, because you remember the baby is like half dead, half alive. It's a bridge baby. Remember, it's between the living and the dead world. So that's how you keep it there.
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah. There you go. So that's all it is. The tire has a syringe that gives them an adrenaline shot to pull them back to life, and then you dunk, dunk, it hits them on the head and they're back down. So,
good stuff.
Keep them somewhere between life and death. We got one more that I will cover if I'm not mistaken. And it is over in our Discord, which you can join by clicking the link in the description below. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on podcast services. And that comes from, no, never mind. Yeah, there it is. Okay. I'm going to give it to the game that probably is the most surprising. Not at all. The Order 1886. This comes from Rude Cold, one of our longtime listeners and patrons. He says, which feels a lot like Hellblade 2 with being so visually impressive but short and shallow. There is more gameplay than Hellblade 2, though, and the world and setting was very unique and interesting. The game so deserved a sequel. And I will say, it is interesting to see a game like Hellblade 2 come because that style of game and setting has been used a lot since Hellblade came out. And so its sequel doesn't feel as interesting as it could have because the gaming landscape decided to use a lot of Norse and whatnot inspired things and use runes and kind of give similar storytelling. Of course, this still has its own hit towards being primarily towards showing psychosis. But there's still something to be said about settings feeling unique in their time period. Not necessarily unique at large, but the Order still remains a style of game that hasn't really been touched on a ton. And that's interesting because it's like God of War 2018 came out and then Hellblade came out in a relatively similar time frame. And the gaming industry just fucking was like, cool, now we're making Norse shit. And that's, so here's what it is. But there you have it. We have a couple more things of news, and then we're going to wrap this episode up. So,
wait, what's yours?
Oh yeah. So mine, and I was thinking through it because I'm trying to go towards games that are actively bad, but also are that are actively thought of as bad, but that I really enjoyed. And I was going to go towards, and I want to make sure that I'm remembering correct that it's actually a poorly received game. So let me quickly Metacritic this. This is older. Internet discussions was a lot different back in. So Divisive is a little different. But I'm going to say poorly received and go off of that. There's a game in the Untold Legends series, which is a series that started on PSP. They're dungeon crawler games, very similar to Diablo. And they're from Sony Online Entertainment back when that was their name. And it's the PS3 entry, the only one they ever did for PS3, called Dark Kingdom. It is super fun. Had a blast with it. Great multiplayer, fun world, hopping in, having a good time. Of course, some of that's tied to childhood or rather teenage memories, but great game. And it sits at a 58 on Metacritic. Oof. But I love the game. And it's one of those weird examples of with PS3 being a retro console now. This is from the same developer that did Champions of Norath, which is like PS2 similar styles of games that were critically acclaimed. There was no reason to think this game or this series of games wouldn't have been good, but they just never landed right with critics, despite having 3 of them. I think Brotherhood of the Blade, which was the first one from PSP, is the highest rated of them all, and it's a 68.
Wow.
So across the board, it's just a series that didn't really leave a mark.
All right.
What's yours?
I'm going to give a real one and then one. So the Divisive, right? So my favorite game that is the most divisive is Fallout 3. That's a very easy answer.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that as a divisive game, but I guess
there are literal factions on the internet of New Vegas versus Fallout 3 fans.
It's one of those games where it wasn't divisive in the moment, but throughout time it's become more divisive.
It's not critically divisive. It's receptionally, I guess, divisive.
It's a lot like Hellblade 2. That game sits at like an 80 on Metacritic.
Right, exactly.
That's not a divisive game.
Yeah, no. In terms of a more fun answer, it's very easy for me. There are 3 games.
I'll give one more then, and one that's a little more modern. But you go ahead.
Well, I'm going to give my 3. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but Deadly Premonition, obvious, great game. Alpha Protocol, fucking fantastic. Obsidian at its finest. Naughty Bear, terrible.
Naughty Bear,
incredible.
All fun answers and all PS3 games.
All PS3 games, yes.
Mine's a little newer. My original was a PS3 game, but to go something newer that I don't think was as necessarily divisive, but I think it's so charming and I genuinely love the game, Biomutant. Sits at a 66 on Metacritic. I adored that game. I played it to platinum, and I don't platinum something unless I'm playing it, and I'm like, fuck yeah, this game's awesome. I'm going to go ahead and keep playing it. And I adore Biomutant. It's so fun. And when I revisited it to get the platinum on PS5, still super fucking fun. That game is just a good time.
You got it twice? That's dope.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Good times. Now, I'll get to this. Biomutant is one of those games where your save carries forward, but about half of the trophies, you've got to do some of the shit in them again to get them to auto pop. So I didn't play the entire game all the way through twice, but I played about another 15 hours of it and had a blast.
Nice, dude.
And if I wasn't in the middle of playing a bunch of other shit, I probably would have just played the whole thing again because it's a fun game. Yeah, that's one of those. It had so much going for it when it was shown and everybody was into it. Then it hit and everybody was like, well, this wasn't exactly what I was thinking. But it's funny. I felt while playing that game exactly what I felt like the premise was trying to sell me on when they gave the trailer. And I seldom feel that way. So I was pretty happy. All right, man. Well, that is the end of the community's take. If you want to be part of those, you can head over to Patreon or to Twitter at Triangle SQRD. You can find us there. You can find us in the link in the description below in our Discord, where you can join us for day-to-day talks with a lot of our other listeners and patrons. And if you want to go to Patreon and support the show with just a $1 per month and give more than your time, which we are always so thankful for, then you can head over to patreon.com/Nartech. All right, Chris. We got 2 things. The first one, I think we're going to be a little quicker on. It has big ramifications, but it feels like it has big ramifications, but I'm actually curious if it does or not. Microsoft Gaming has announced that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 will be added directly to Game Pass on release, while also announcing that the game will be shown during Xbox's showcase on June 9th. As we know, Call of Duty was a big part of the Activision purchase and why a lot of people were against it, because Call of Duty is so massive that it feels like taking a huge section of the industry and suddenly moving it to one console. So a lot of the arguments were about how that was not going to happen, but that doesn't have to actually happen for it to happen in the mindset of gamers. But this was something that Velvet reached out to me about too, where he was saying he wonders if they're going to do this. This was before this was announced, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think it may have been that there were rumors it was going to be before it was kind of more said. What do you actually think the implications of this are for a series as big as Call of Duty and with as much ability to bring in money as Call of Duty? Do you think that this is an actual benefit to utilizing Call of Duty in the best way to make money? Or do you think this is a short-sighted trying to have a win for Game Pass to show a boost in numbers again?
I think it's all 3.
Okay.
I do think it's short-sighted because of how much money that game makes. I think I was reading, I don't remember who it was, but I recognized the face. Maybe it was Brad Sams. I think that's an industry guy. And I think he was saying that by his estimate, it would take something like 11 million subscribers added to be worth it. Maybe 20 million, something along those numbers. And that doesn't seem possible to me, so I do think it's short-sighted. I think it's a win for Game Pass. It's a win for Game Pass regardless, and it is 1,000% a win for players, because now I will be playing this on PC through Game Pass and enjoying my time with it. But I don't know. I think it's a big risk. If it doesn't work, I guess the big closing argument I would make is that if this doesn't work, it's the nail in the coffin. I think it's a test. It has to be a test, right? It's got to be the true test of Game Pass. If the biggest game not called Grand Theft Auto in the world is in Game Pass for free, and Xboxes still don't move and Game Pass numbers still don't go up appreciably, it's over. It has to be, right? Like, I don't think that's naive to say. If Call of Duty can't bring Game Pass to a sustainable level, it's done. It has to be done.
Well, and I also think it's the reverse, right? I don't think you can put the Call of Duty cat back in the bag. Once you've made it a Game Pass day and date thing, I think the only way that it doesn't stay a Game Pass day and date thing is if Game Pass doesn't stay a thing. That might be a little too extreme of thinking, but that kind of feels right. I think once you do it, people aren't going to be like, well, hey, why the fuck isn't this year's Call of Duty on Game Pass day one?
Yeah, I mean,
because
again,
you've built an expectation.
Yes,
you know?
But they were smart enough to say case by case basis with all of this stuff.
Thankfully, they were.
And
but
look,
case by case, now you're getting the idea where Call of Duty as a case, people are going to be like, well, no, but Call of Duty's already hit it. But I agree with you. It shouldn't be, but perception's a bitch. And perception of this is going to be, why was last year's, but not this one?
I was going to say, to be clear, I agree with you.
Yeah. All that to say, I'm of two minds on this, because part of me thinks, is this going to be an appreciable enough bump for Game Pass? And Call of Duty is also very primarily toward a very specific subset of the audience that's a way more casual player. So even if they sub to Game Pass to play this, after 7 months of Game Pass, they would have been better off buying the game.
Yep.
And unless they continue to, unless this sparks something in them to try other games because of Game Pass that may make them want to keep it, then this is a short-term, short-sighted bump that may fall directly back down. And I wonder what that actually looks like. And I don't claim to know if that will be viewed as successful or not. What it may be, like you said, a test. It may be a test to see if doing games of this scale often enough once a year can get you an appreciable enough gain in subs to where enough people stick around that gain starts to slowly compile, and you get to a point where you hit Netflix's thing where suddenly you have 50 million subs. Mm-hmm. Even though it took a little bit to get there, but because enough people felt like, well, at least once a year they come through with a really big game, and the rest of the time, the little bit of extra cost outside of just buying the other game is worth it to have the ability to try a few things. And maybe that's the balance, and that might genuinely be successful, but I don't know. And it also brings in the fact that I'm only bringing this in because it's one of those things. Metal Hellsinger Game Pass apparently hit Game Pass, and I want to see if I can find it because I'm looking on it here. So this is a Reddit post 9 hours ago. Maybe they actually they took it down, unfortunately. Basically, what's going on is the dev for the game says that he's against Game Pass because he's seen the impact of what it can do to sales, and that he thinks the game sold a lot worse as a result of this. And that's an interesting idea to kind of come to. So here it is right here. So this is 20 hours ago. This is N4G. Now this is Altchar, ALTCHAR, alternate character, I guess. So take that with a grain of salt. This is something I saw in passing. David Goldfarb, founder of The Outsiders, expresses his opposition to Microsoft's Game Pass subscription service. He believes that Game Pass had a significant impact on the sales of their game, Metal Hellsinger. He suggests that Game Pass can eat away at the audience on PC, especially for niche titles with no replay value. So, in this same moment where we're talking about all these benefits of it, this is at least one person's opinion on the cost of something like Game Pass. So I continue to be really intrigued at people's response to the subscription model, both consumers and developers, because those are the two sides of this coin. For it to be in favor for consumers, enough developers have to see the benefit of it. And it's interesting when ones come forward and go, we think that this really wasn't a good move for us, but we did it and we're having to pay the cost for it. But now we've learned something. Maybe this isn't the best way to move forward for niche titles. Maybe it's not the best way to move forward for large titles either. Hard to say. You know, from like a game I kind of remember is Outriders was a game that hit Game Pass and that game never hit its expected, income. But it had a lot of players.
It did. It's a great game.
But here's the question. Would it have ever had that many players were it not for something like Game Pass? And if it would have, okay, they would have made that money outright. But maybe they wouldn't have. Maybe no one would have played that game, and it would have been not only a dead game, quite literally, but also an underperforming game. At least when it's a game with a active user base and sadly didn't hit sales, you can kind of be like, there's something here. We just got to figure out how to make money off of it better.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
It's a weird one. But let's jump into the final thing real quick. And it's CD Projekt Red. We've already talked about them a little bit. They say they want to release major games more frequently. So this is videogameschronicle.com. Go check out the article that we're going to be following along here. The company has had a handful of projects in development, or has a handful of projects in development. So excluding expansions, the company's flagship releases to date have been The Witcher 2, Assassins of Kings, The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, and Cyberpunk 2077. 4 games since 2007. During CD Projekt's quarterly earnings call on Tuesday, the company was asked whether it has the bandwidth to focus on more than one large game simultaneously, with the goal of making its release schedule less lumpy. We already worked on 2 projects at the same time when we worked on Cyberpunk DLC, Phantom Liberty, because that was a game-sized project with almost 300 people working on it. And at the same time, we have already been working on Polaris. So we've had an experience of working on more than one project, said CEO Michael Nowakowski, I guess is how you actually pronounce that. Quote, and we are working on more than one project at this time as well. There is Cyberpunk 2 being developed in Boston. There is Polaris being developed predominantly here in Europe. And obviously, we have other projects with other teams like Project Sirius, also in Boston, with the Molasses Flood. And there is the Witcher 1 remake done in cooperation with Canis Majoris. So you can definitely expect us to release more titles, and the cadence of launches is something we definitely plan to increase, although I will obviously not comment on what is the space between projects time-wise. CD Projekt provided an update on the size of its development teams engaged on current projects as part of its financial results on Tuesday. So check that out if you have interest in seeing the amount of people it takes to handle these projects and working on more than one at a time. But this brings towards something that a lot of the industry has been talking about. How can you make a release schedules more common so that you can see returns from games more often to help when games take 7 years? If you at least release a game in between that 7-year window span, you can get some money in to help keep pumping into the other one. How do you feel about this, Chris? Because I think you and I have both kind of been on the side of smaller games to a degree more often would be nice. But at the same time, CD Projekt Red doesn't make smaller games. So you're muted, just so you're aware.
Of course, I'm always muted when I'm chilling. No, CD Projekt doesn't make smaller games. They make giant RPGs. And that's the thing. I don't know that I would want them to transition to smaller games, but I do think they can strike a better cadence, right? They can, Witcher 4 is in development, Cyberpunk 2 is in development, Witcher 1. So they have a bunch of stuff that they can be doing, and they can be remastering. Witcher 2, Assassins of Kings, I think it's called. That's not playable on anything. Really?
Yeah.
It's
even a remaster would be something.
Right, exactly. So I think they should just be leveraging those IPs, and maybe they're big enough that they can publish too, and that might help them even out. So we'll see. I'm interested. I don't think I want to see CD Projekt start shrinking their games so that they can release more of them, but finding a way to release more in their business is a good thing. Give me that remaster. I want to play Assassins of Kings. I'm going to download it now because of
that. I really want to play 1, but I don't want to play 1 on PC. So a remake is like perfect territory for me. But here's an interesting thing, right? A lot of the times you look at this and you think your intuition is if you want to make games quicker, they either need to be smaller or you think you need to throw more bodies at them. But I think it's been interesting to see throwing more bodies at games seems to only make them take even longer.
Yeah.
which has been a really weird thing because you feel like, well, if the game's smaller and you have smaller people, ergo it's going to go quicker. But it seems to be, and this is something that, I don't really ever watch Sacred Symbols, but I do occasionally watch Sacred Symbols Plus, where Colin has developers and people on to give insights into the game industry. And the one that he did with Jonathan Blow was really interesting because, it's been a long time since Jonathan Blow's put anything out. The Witness, which was a PS4 launch game, was the last game he put out. So up until recently where they released Braid Anniversary. So think about all that. But he was talking about having too many people actually makes a game go worse. People are doing less work because they're having to wait for certain things to make progress. Mm-hmm. And a game ends up becoming too expensive for no real reason. And it's weird because I even feel like most people, if you really look at your job, most people can come to realize, I think I've said this on this show before, most places can operate better, more efficiently, and have people constantly working, not in a bad way, but in a you're actually necessary if they downsized. And it's a weird thing because you don't want there to be people with less jobs, but it's that old too many cooks. At some point, throwing more bodies at something is not going to help it. It's probably going to complicate it more and slow it down and give you a less unified vision because you have more people throwing ideas into the ring. And that's a really weird thing because it does kind of feel like the only real way to get to games quicker is to it can't be to throw more bodies at one project. It seems like the real answer, no one wants to do this, is hire so many more people for so many more games. You want a game every 3 years? Well, then we need to start developing a game right now. In 3 years, we need to start developing a game at a different studio with different people. And then 3 years from there, we got to start developing another game with other group of people. And now we have, this is exactly how Call of Duty does it. Yeah. For a reason. You have 3 studios rotating out so that they can spend more time making a game of a certain expectation and get it out every year, every 2 years if you really wanted to go that route. But that's just not how most people don't want to hire that many people,
Yeah. I don't know, man. I hope they figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know what to think, but it's just a thing of you're not going to ever hit a good release schedule. Or let me say this. You can. But at some point, I think Cyberpunk kind of shows this. Is it not better to put all your eggs into one basket, but also make sure that you actually deliver? There's a lot of people that are like, we don't care how long a game takes to make, so long as when it does come out, it hits.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like crack.
So I don't know. It's been interesting that a lot of the studios that were going towards being 2 studio teams, we've not seen any fruit of that labor, right? It was supposed to be like, Bend is getting a second studio and a new studio and a second team. That didn't really end up being anything. Okay, Guerrilla has got a new studio with room for a second team. What the fuck have we gotten? Nothing.
Yeah, that's true. Nothing.
Naughty Dog attempted a second team for a while and gave us The Last of Us, which is pretty cool.
It just merged back together.
And then they merged back together, and then they separated again for this multiplayer game, and then they're just merging back into the same team. So it's like clearly just having more teams and having more bodies isn't working either as a blanket. It may work for some, doesn't work for all. So it's a complicated thing, but it's funny because Chris, clearly I have less time. But for some reason, I'm advocating for there to be more games coming out, even though I can't keep up with the games that we do have. But the games that the studios I want to play games from are taking fucking 7 years to release a game.
True.
So I don't know.
Well,
maybe this is a good example of being happy with what you have.
Yeah, the best times for a studio might just be the speculation period, I said that about Game of Thrones. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, but it's weird because like the final season of Game of Thrones is pretty brutal. Universally. Yeah. No one is like, oh great, and it had more time between seasons than I think anything did. Any of the other seasons did.
This is a very valid point.
Who knows? Either way, it's an interesting thing to see, and it is nice to be reminded of the Witcher 1 remake. I had actually forgotten that was coming. So hopefully that's something we see relatively soon. I used to be of the mindset that a remake would be quicker to do. That hasn't seemed to pan out in the slightest. So otherwise, you'd think we would have already seen something else from Bluepoint by now.
Valid. Hey, Brett,
well, to be fair, they're working on an original game.
I wanted to ask you about something.
Sure.
Because I'm on your Steam account because you happen to also own The Witcher 2 Assassin of Kings. So you came
I do.
And what I found interesting was that you played about 80 hours of it.
Yeah.
Nice. So the one I have to ask you about, I have to know. 166.7 hours of The Vanishing of Ethan Carter.
I don't know how the hell that happened. I didn't even beat that game.
You have 0 achievements and 166.7 hours on a walking simulator.
I think that game is broken because I did not play that much.
Dude. How does that happen?
Bad tracking.
166 hours. We'll give you just to make you feel better. This is my top 2 is Marvel Snap 808.9 hours, Time Clickers 95.8 hours.
Hey, play The Witcher 2. It's actually a great game. Very different than The Witcher 3 though.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I played it on 360 as a kid, but
it's more like God of War meets hub areas than The Witcher 3.
That's sexy.
But,
Well, I am a fan of The Witcher 3 now, so who knows? Maybe I'll hate this.
I'm curious. I've always wondered, would I hate The Witcher 1? How different is it from The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3?
It's different.
Yeah, I know. All right, guys. Well, we actually have... We have a question, but Chris, I'm going to be honest, I don't have time to go into it. I want to save it for next week. And it's from Pork Chops, and it's a food-related question due to our community's take, or due to our Velvet's Corner last week. But I would rather wait and do it service than rush it here so I can get to bed.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
You're the host, man. I'm following your lead.
Pork Chops, look me dead in the eyes, look me dead in the windows of my soul, okay? Even if you're just listening to this on podcast, imagine I'm there, glasses on, daddy energy vibing. Look me in the eyes as I tell you. We will get to this. I just need some patience. I let this episode get out of control and out of hand. I'm going to be honest. This episode should not be 2.5 hours long. But if you're still listening, that's not my fault. So I will take whatever comes from that. And, if you don't like this episode, why are you listening still? And if you do like this episode, hey, thanks for still listening. Because easily probably could have been 30 minutes less. I don't know what the fuck we've been doing, Chris, but here we are.
Dude, you know what? We've been having conversations. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, there we go, Chris.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? With that in mind, I think it is time to wish our patrons, be thankful towards our patrons. Wish them a good week, and all of our listeners. We love you guys. So with that in mind, we're going to shout out our patrons and wrap this show up. Chris, thanks for joining me as always. Thank you guys for listening for whatever the hell we were doing today. And with that said, we shout out all of our patrons as a way to thank them for making the show possible. So that starts with Duh Overlord, Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, Matt Tubbs, Easton328, Aztec King, Lecheon69, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Danny Villiobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Matthew Green, and Sean Sanderud. Thanks to each and every one of you. See you next week.
Peace.